Good evening and welcome to Decision Saskatchewan. The makeup of our provincial government will change over the next 3 hours, and we're here to lead you through it.
That's right. We will have updates on when your MLA gets elected and what those seats mean for our province. The dynamics of the night will be fluid. We know roughly 61,000 people have applied to vote by mail, and when you factor in advance voting, it's possible more than 200,000 people voted before they woke up this morning.
And a lot of our urban ridings were decided by less than 1,000 votes last time around, and it's in those urban ridings that we're seeing up to 2,500 registered for mail-in ballots. So expect those votes to be at play tonight.
Yeah, for sure. You can also expect reaction tonight from Saskatchewan's major party leaders, along with some high-profile representatives from the past. You will hear from former Premier Brad Wall, along with longtime NDP Cabinet Minister Pat Atkinson.
And our global news team is standing by at all major party headquarters across the province. Kyle Benning is stationed at the Sask Party HQ in Saskatoon at the Sheraton Cavalier. Anna McMillan will bring us the latest from the NDP headquarters in downtown Saskatoon. In Regina, Colton Prale is at the Ramada Plaza with the Sask Party. And Caitlin Wilson will keep us up to date at the NDP Regina headquarters in the Delta Hotel.
And our Jackie Wilson is live in Saskatoon with political scientist Greg Peltzer tonight. We'll be heading there for analysis throughout the evening.
And tracking Saskatchewan's 61 races, we have our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, mapping out the major gains, losses, and storylines throughout the night. And for a nationwide look at the election, our weekend anchor, Mark Carcassole, is live with our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stevenson.
As we take you through the race tonight, you can follow along. If you take a look at the graphics at the bottom and the side of your screen, you will see which candidates are leading the race and who is elected as the night progresses. The seat count below shows the number of winners, but also candidates who are leading their riding. So those numbers will change over the next few hours. If you need to step away from the TV tonight, you can also keep up with the election races. We are streaming across Saskatchewan and the rest of the country live on the Global TV app. This is a new tool for us here in Saskatchewan. You just search Global TV in the App Store, download it, and from there you can choose the Regina or Saskatoon stream under Global News Live 24/7. And of course, we are streaming live on globalnews.ca.
Now let's take a look at what's on the line for tonight. 31 seats is the mark a party needs to hit in order to claim a majority government. When this campaign began just 28 days ago, the Saskatchewan Party held 46 seats in the legislature. The official opposition, NDP, had 13, while the other 2 seats sat vacant. Those seats in the Walsh Acres and Saskatoon Eastview ridings. For essentially the last 30 years, only 2 parties have ever formed our provincial government, the New Democrats and the Saskatchewan Party. On the campaign trail, there's been lots of discussion on old party records, but the fact is both Scott Moe and Ryan Meili are relatively new to the job. It's their first election as party leaders. Let's see how they got here. The Sask Party is seeking its 4th straight term, originally formed in 1997 when Conservatives and Liberals joined forces. Brad Wall became leader in 2004, capturing the party's first government 3 years later.
Tonight in the province of Saskatchewan, hope beat fear.
10 years of Wall came with a growing population, economy, and jobs, but it didn't come without growing debt, the global transportation hub flop, and the Regina bypass controversy. Wall stepped down in 2018, paving the way for 2-term MLA Scott Moe.
My commitment to you and to everyone across this province is that I will always stand with you, I will stand with your community, and I will always stand with Saskatchewan.
Before the Sask Party era, the province was orange for 16 years, divvied up between Roy Romano and Lorne Calvert. Romano, known for his tough fiscal reform, cutting services and increasing taxes to bring the province out of deficit. But that once dominant party is now reduced to just 13 seats compared to the Sask Party's 46. Ryan Meili is tasked with growing those numbers or risk Saskatchewan becoming a one-party province. A tall order for the Saskatoon-Meewasin MLA, only elected in 2017 before winning the leadership bid in what was his 3rd kick at the can.
Is what the Sask Party is trying to sell us actually what we want to continue with, or is it time for a new vision and a new approach?
Neither Moe nor Meili have the tenure of their predecessors, but tonight's results could decide if they'll get there.
Plan for the investments that will get
Now let's bring in our chief political correspondent, David Aiken, who will be tracking the results for us tonight. David, a big night for both the Saskatchewan Party looking to hold their seats and the NDP hoping to pick up a few more.
Yeah, no, great to be here, guys. And I think it's going to be an exciting night because I think both leaders might be able to say at the end of tonight that it was mission accomplished. Obviously, for the Sask Party and for Scott Moe, mission accomplished is holding on that majority. As long as I think they get something 40 seats and better, I think the Sask Party says, right, mission accomplished. As for the NDP, Ryan Meili, this is really a rebuilding plan for the NDP. They want to have more seats tonight. They get anywhere close to 20. I think the NDP stands up at the end of the night and says, hey, look, we accomplish something. And of course, Ryan Meili wants to win his seat because the last two NDP leaders, they didn't win their seat in a general election. I've got a map in front of me. This is the 2016 electoral map. Those are the two NDP seats in the north of the province. They're colored orange. And then the light green, of course, that's the Sask Party, not the Green Party. That's the Sask Party. It's probably going to look orange on the top and a lot of green on the bottom. We're going to be zooming in on the cities a lot tonight, and that's what we're going to keep an eye on the change. This is the electoral map of Regina from last time around, 2016. 12 electoral seats were up for grabs, and you can see the NDP, they were in the middle. There's going to be some fights in here tonight. The NDP are looking to improve. Saskatoon, 14 seats. It's the biggest city, the most seats. There's going to be a lot of fights here. We're going to keep an eye on Saskatoon-Miwas, and that, of course, is where Ryan Meili, he has that seat, had it in the by-election. Roger Perrant won it for the Sask Party in 2016. Sadly, Roger had ended up with cancer shortly thereafter and succumbed to that. So that is this is what it looked like after 2016. But we're also going to be keeping an eye on Prince Albert. The NDP have the northern seat right now, the Northcote seat, and the southern seat right down here, Prince Albert Carleton. Joe Hargrave, he's the Minister of Crowns. He's the guy responsible for cutting the bus service, the STC, and the NDP are targeting the southern riding. Same thing if we go down to the south end of the province, down to Moose Jaw. There's two seats. The south one, Moose Jaw-Waccamaw, that's also a seat that the NDP are targeting. We'll see if they can pull that off. That's the gross story. Again, Sask Party playing defense, trying to hold on to 40, and the NDP trying to build things up. The big wild card, guys, and Ryan, you touched this on the beginning of the show, is all of these mail-in ballots that are out there. The mail-in ballots not going to be counted for a couple of days. There's tons of advance votes that are going to be counted towards the end of the night. They will be counted today. But the mail-in ballots, boy, there's a lot out there. And in a close race, we may not be able to call the race tonight until we see those mail-in ballots in a couple of days.
Yeah, and David, let's stay on that point for just a second here. We have a lot of close races in this general election. Where do you see mail-in ballots being a major X factor?
Well, happily, Selection Saskatchewan has told us where they sent out mail-in ballots. We won't know how many are coming back, but we do know where they went. And the number one riding in the entire province, all 61 ridings, is right here. Regina Pasqua. More mail-in ballots went out to voters there, and we believe as many as 30% of the voters in Regina Pasqua have a mail-in ballot. This is the results from last time around. Mohammed Fayaz winning, but not by much. You can see here, 44% to just about 41%. So all those mail-in ballots could really play a big factor. Number two in the entire province is right here, Regina, Wascana Plains. Again, about 30% of the electorate may have a mail-in ballot. I don't think Regina, Wascana Plains are going to be in play tonight, but Regina Pasqua, I think, absolutely is. And if it's close, again, those mail-in ballots could turn it one way or the other.
Thanks, David. Now, interesting to note, Regina Pasqua was one of the closest races in 2016, only decided by about 300 votes. Also interesting to note, Election Saskatchewan so far has said they've received 35,000 mail-in ballots back. Of course, that number could grow as they keep getting the ballots back. You had until 8 p.m. tonight to send those in, so we're expecting maybe an even higher number as the days continue.
It's kind of funny because, in a sense, COVID-19 has ruined a lot of celebrations this year, and for some of the candidates tonight, they won't really get a full celebration because they're not going to know until after those mail-in ballots are counted whether or not they have a party to throw.
Absolutely. We might not know a lot of those results tonight, but for someone who is tracking the results for the Sask Party at the headquarters in Regina tonight, we're going to go to Colton Parale. Colton, the Sask Party is sure hoping to hold on to some of those key seats.
Absolutely, Allison. You know, there's a sentiment that politics in this province can at times be predictable, but that is absolutely not the case here in Regina. There are a number of very tight ridings, and we're going to be keeping an eye on them all night long. In 2016, 4 of the 10 closest races were here in the Queen City. This time around, it looks like exactly the same thing. Polling all the way up to the election showed that the city was basically split between the Sask Party and the NDP. For the Sask Party, it's really important that they keep a hold of those 4 close races. They did win them all last time around, not just to show that they still appeal to urban voters, but also there are 2 very important candidates that they'd like to keep a hold of. The first one, Tina Beaudry-Miller in Regina University. She was the Advanced Education Minister, also responsible for the Office of Women along with Innovation Saskatchewan. She is a high-profile young female cabinet minister, absolutely critical for the Sask Party that she retains her seat. The other candidate is Mark Doherty. He's over in Regina Coronation Park. That was the tightest race of 2016. Just 147 votes separated him from the NDP. He was the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly. In the past, he's also been a cabinet minister, another very important candidate for them to keep a hold of. The 2 other ridings they're paying attention to, David mentioned it, Regina Pasqua, the other one, Regina Wall-Shakers. Allison?
Thanks, Colton. We'll be checking in with you throughout the evening. And Ryan, I just want to note for our viewers, on the bottom there, you can see the Sask Party, NDP, Green, and other. All of those right now are at 0. That's because we're still waiting for those results to come in.
But as those results do come in, Allison, the magic number is 31. 31 grants a party a majority in the legislature. Of course, we have 2 parties that have really dominated the seats in the Assembly for the last several decades. So it would be a surprise to see anyone else grab a seat tonight, but we'll certainly be watching all of those storylines tonight. So we've heard a little bit about what the Sask Party is looking to do tonight. Let's go now to Anna McMillan. She's at NDP headquarters in Saskatoon. And Anna, what does the NDP need to do tonight?
Hey Ryan, hey Allison, happy election night. We have such an exciting night ahead of us, and it could be a really big one for the Saskatchewan NDP. The goal tonight, of course, is to pick up as many seats as they possibly can, more than the 13 they had going into this. So one of the big questions is going to be whether they can push out of those urban ridings where they typically have the most support. There's a number of close races across the province. One of the big ones is here in Saskatoon. That's Saskatoon-Meewasin, and it's Party Leader Ryan Meili's riding. So obviously, he needs to win that one tonight for the party. He's up against the Saskatchewan Party's Ryland Hunter, a formidable opponent, a lawyer, a small business owner, and it would be surprising to see Meili not take that seat, but it certainly wouldn't be the first time that happens to an NDP leader. This happened in 2011, this happened in 2016, so crucial that he picks that up tonight. He'll be here and give it a leader's address sometime around 9. We'll have more information on that just ahead.
All right, looking forward to that. Thank you, Anna. She mentioned that race in Saskatoon-Meewasin, how basically that has to be priority number 1 for the NDP to make sure that Ryan Meili is re-elected. He would be the 3rd straight leader to lose his seat in a general election after Cam Broughton and Dwayne Lingenfelter. So if the NDP is going to make some gains tonight, I think it really starts with Saskatoon-Meewasin.
Starts with Saskatoon-Meewasin, and then hopefully picking up on their 13 seats that they had at dissolution. And we're just minutes away from the first polls coming in tonight. After the break, we'll bring you the latest numbers and early leads from the ridings. And for the story behind those figures, we will turn to one of the leading experts in the province for the ridings he's keeping an eye on, the panel, and more when Decision Saskatchewan continues in a matter of minutes. Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Well, polls closed just over 15 minutes ago, so we're still waiting on the results to come in. Again, I'll just refer our viewers to the bottom of the screen. As results do start to trickle in, those numbers will start to change. Those numbers represent not only seats that have been won, but seats that have a candidate leading in them. So that will start to paint a picture for us as the night continues. And as viewers, you're going to want to watch out as the numbers inch closer to 31. 31 is the mark for a majority government. Again, though, as the early results do come in, those will be leading and elected, not just elected. So that is one thing to watch out. And of course, to get to that 31 mark, the parties need to pick up some seats. Let's go to Jackie Wilson now. She's with Greg Peltzer in our Saskatoon studio that are going to break down some ridings to watch.
Thank you, Ryan. Allison. We are talking about ridings to watch and which are the very exciting ones. I mean, how do we pick? But Greg Peltzer joins me now. He's a USask Poli-Sci professor. What are you looking out for tonight?
Well, there's lots. And the first one, of course, is Ryan Meili's seat in Saskatoon, Meewasin. That one's important because the NDP, their last two leaders, lost their seats in the general. So is it going to be a third time, a charm for the NDP, and they're able to save their leader? Or is it going to go down the third time in a row? So that's a big one. And then in Regina, that one with the whole fiasco around Sandra Moore and that riding in Regina. And is she going to gather enough vote that splits the vote with the NDP and Derek Myers is successful as a Sask Party candidate, or is her support going to wither in the NDP pickup? That one is going to be a fascinating race. And then finally in Prince Albert. In Prince Albert Carleton, that one in the summer no one would have predicted was going to be competitive. And all signs are, you follow the leaders, and both leaders are up in Prince Albert this weekend, so that one's going to be a fascinating race to watch.
Let's talk about the ridings and how it changes up the mix-up of kind of the federal liberal to federal conservatives if Sask Party loses a couple key members. What's at stake here and what ridings?
Absolutely, this is huge. So you think about the Sask Party when it was originally founded, a coalition of federal liberals, federal conservatives, and people have seen that tent shrink quite a bit. The big stalwarts like Ganafor and Cravets and June Droughty all having left the party, of course, retired. And if they were to lose, for example, Mark Doherty and Tina Beaudry-Miller, or not have Chris Garrett win in Saskatoon Eastview, and everyone expects Gord Wine to win, of course, there'd be only one federal liberal left in the party. And that changes the dynamics considerably, especially for the long term, for the viability of the Saskatchewan Party as really this coalition of the centre and centre-right.
All right, we will have to wait and see as the numbers start rolling in. Thank you so much. Ryan, Allison, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Jackie, and thank you, Greg, as well. Allison, Greg mentioned it there, but one of the fascinating races at play in this province is Walsh Acres in Regina.
And interesting for a couple of reasons. So right now it's sitting vacant because incumbent Warren Steinley for the Sask Party, he actually left to pursue federal politics. So right now it's Derek Myers for the Sask Party, relatively new to the game, up against Kelly Hardy for the NDP. But at play also an independent, Sandra Morin, who is a longtime NDP MLA, former cabinet minister. She won the nomination for that riding, and then Ryan Meili refused to sign off on her papers. Reasons we still don't know why. Yeah. So that's going to be a riding to watch out for tonight. Possible vote splitting going that way, but Roberta Bell is actually down in the Regina Walsh Acres tonight. And Roberta, we've talked also about the mass amount of mail-in ballots playing a role in this election. Why is it so significant this time around?
Well, Allison, here in this riding in particular, we've been at this polling station for a couple hours now. They are, in fact, tearing it down. But we haven't seen the people that we would expect to see and that we would have had to see in the past. And we do know that in this riding, there are almost 1,200 mail-in ballots. And as you mentioned, we are expecting a very close race. I had the opportunity to speak with Saskatchewan's Chief Electoral Officer last week, who did say we very well may see some delayed results of this election. There may be some close ridings, potentially this one, that we may not be able to get a decision in tonight. We might not know, as you mentioned, whether it's going orange for the NDP or green for the Saskatchewan Party. And this riding in the very recent past has gone both ways. So with such a high number of mail-in ballots there, that really is one of the storylines we're following, and particularly in this riding tonight, just how those mail-in ballots will come into the decision and whether we will even get a decision at the end of the night. So that's really what the excitement's all about when we're following election, is those close races. And with this a new phenomenon of mail-in ballots that we just have not seen before, it's really giving us a new lens through which we're trying to understand the political landscape here in Saskatchewan.
Thanks, Roberta. And now Roberta talks about it being a new phenomenon here with this mail-in ballots. Yeah. Last time around, 4,400 people voted by mail-in ballot. This time around, we've said 61,000 have registered to vote by mail-in. We have about 35,000 that are in. We don't know if that number could increase or not, but that's why we're going to be seeing a lot of those close races, maybe not decided tonight.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to sort of look at how an old-fashioned tool is being used for a new purpose. purpose. In the olden days, this was a mechanism basically for students out of province, for snowbirds, for people like that. So to see what was a very traditional mechanism being deployed here, of course, it's not going to create an exciting atmosphere for some of these candidates, but really I just think it shows how everyone in this province has been able to adapt to these times. And I mean, the fact that we are seeing cases as high as they are right now in the middle of a pandemic, for us to still be able to exercise our democratic rights, I just think it says something.
Yeah, and mail-in ballot is a big part of that. And we now have Caitlin Wilson, who's live at the NDP headquarters in Regina. Caitlin, you're going to be tracking the gains the NDP is hoping to make tonight.
I am, but I want to talk about the mood here. It's very quiet, almost eerie. There's not very many people here, just the media. I wish I could say there were supporters here and candidates, but they're going to be watching the results from their home or campaign office. Because of COVID, things are looking very different. Of course, the NDP looking to pick up some key battleground seats here in the city. We've been talking about Regina University, and Regina Pasqua is going to be another close one to watch. Not only is it Saskatchewan's most diverse riding, but in 2011, 11% of the votes went to the Liberal candidate, which of course we know this time the Liberals are not running a candidate in that riding, so it'll be interesting to see where those votes will go. Of course, four incumbents looking to hold on to their seats as well. We have Troy Weatherspoon in Regina Rosemont and Nicole Sarr in Regina Douglas Park. So of course we'll be watching these ridings and bringing you all the latest details as these results unfold throughout the evening. Allison, Ryan?
Thanks, Caitlin. And I want to point out what she mentioned off the top there, eerily quiet in the NDP headquarters. I imagine it's going to be like that across the board. More media there than any of the party and any of the candidates, really.
Yeah, so you wonder, I mean, you don't get the big party atmosphere, but does this allow for perhaps some intimate moments for candidates? Obviously, it takes a great deal of personal investment to step up to the plate and say, I want to represent some constituents here. Your family has to make sacrifices, your friends, all the people out knocking doors with you.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
perhaps
7, 8, 9,
this is an opportunity for candidates to celebrate with their family, their friends, all the people that got them there, as much as they are, basically going to the big party like they used to.
And I know one person who's probably going to be celebrating with her family regardless of the outcome is Alina Young, who actually just had her very first baby, a daughter, Hera, born yesterday. So she was 9 months pregnant on the campaign trail, delivered a baby daughter yesterday, and she's watching the results at home.
Well, I mean, hey, she's hoping for 2 wins in the last couple of days.
Exactly.
We'll still be watching and waiting for Regina University along with several other close ridings. Again, looking at the bottom of our screen, we don't really have any results coming in. Polls have been closed for close to half an hour now, so we should be getting some stuff soon. But let's turn to David Akin now. I want to bring him back in. And David, I want to hear a little bit about a potential path to victory for the NDP if that does happen tonight.
Yeah, I mean, whenever the NDP wins government in Saskatchewan, they sweep Regina, sweep Saskatoon, sweep Prince Albert, sweep Moose Jaw, they take the two in the north. There you go. There's your NDP government. It's pretty unlikely that's going to happen tonight. I think there's still enough strength of the Saskatchewan Party in Regina and in Saskatoon that they're going to be able to hold on to things. In fact, one of the things we're going to watch on it, of course, is the popular vote. And, you sort of have to keep some things in mind because if you look at the overall popular vote in the province, it'll seem like, wow, Sask Party. But let's take a look. This is 2016 again. Let's take a look at what happened in Lloydminster last time, if I'll pop that up. Colleen Young's the incumbent. She won last time by 87%. NDP just got 8%. I got a funny feeling that Colleen's probably got a good chance of winning again tonight. But my point on that is where they win the Sask Party in rural Saskatchewan, they run up the score. Now, one of the other things I wanted to pick up on, too, was something Greg Peltzer was telling Jackie Wilson, and that is one of the things we're going to be looking at is, this is Scott Moe's party now. It's his first election. Where does he put the party on the map relative to Brad Wall? Brad Wall's an exceptional politician that sort of hit that center-right spot perfectly. Got a lot of support from people who might call themselves federal liberals or whatever in the center. Now, if there's been a knock on Scott Moe, it's he's moved the party to the right. Now, how might we measure that tonight? I think we take a look at a riding like Regina Coronation Park. Mark Doherty is running again. It was a super tight race. This is the last time, 2016. Doherty's in it again tonight. He's running for re-election. And if we see Noor Burki sort of climb ahead, we might conclude that folks in Coronation Park looked at Scott Moe's party and said, it's a little off the spectrum that I like, and now they come back to the NDP. Same thing, I think, in the Southern Moose Jaw riding, the Southern Prince Albert riding. Again, those will be voters who say, hey, what's going on? So that's one of the storylines we're going to look to tonight is, how do we interpret where Scott Moe goes sort of on the spectrum? Guys, back to you in the studio.
Interesting stuff. Thanks a lot, David. It's just so interesting to see David work through that so quickly in terms of his breakdowns. He's an incredibly skilled man. He did mention Scott Moe's first time around as party leader, his first general election.
And that's what's going to be interesting to track tonight. And that's where Kyle Benning is at the Sask Party headquarters in Saskatoon. And Kyle, this is Scott Moe's first election as party leader. It's been an interesting campaign for him.
That's right, Allison. It's been a very interesting campaign. Obviously, Scott Moe, as you mentioned, Scott Moe's first election as leader of the Sask Party. We're joined here right now with the campaign communications director, Jim Billington. Jim, I guess, how has this campaign looked for Scott Moe? Obviously, it's his first as leader. It's in a global pandemic. How has it been for him in his rookie election?
I think not just for Scott, but for all campaigns right now, it's been pretty unprecedented. I mean, I think all the campaigns have done a really good job preparing for the COVID-19 pandemic, just like Saskatchewan people have done, shifting the way that we're doing things across the province. But for Scott and his first time as leader, I mean, it's exciting, for sure it is. You wait a long time to get to this point, you knock on a lot of doors, and 8 o'clock has passed now, so you hope that the voters trust you.
Right. That's one thing that our political scientist on the panel today has mentioned, is that door knocking means so much more in Saskatchewan than it would in some other provinces.
Absolutely.
And getting that face-to-face time. But obviously during a pandemic, it's going to be pretty difficult. So I guess, how have you managed safety as well as door knocking?
It really takes a multifaceted approach. You try a larger online presence. We've certainly put more emphasis on a digital presence this year. You try to stream your events online. We've done things like our big honkin' drive-in rallies, different than anything we've ever done. But at the end of the day, you're right, you can't beat door knocking. You can't beat pounding the pavement, getting to meet people. We've done that in a safe way this year, wearing masks like we are right now. But at the end of the day, good old-fashioned door knocking is the best way to win campaigns.
Definitely. Final quick question for you here, Jim.
Sure.
I know that a lot of the exit polls had the Sask Party ahead by about 20 to 30 points. How confident are you feeling tonight?
We're feeling very confident tonight. And like I said, polls are closed now. Those are the polls that really matter. It's what's happening today, and we'll see if the people of Saskatchewan place their trust in a fourth-term majority Saskatchewan Party government. We're feeling confident they will.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for your time, Jim.
Thanks, Kyle.
Allison, as you can hear, pretty confident night for the Sask Party.
Thanks, Kyle. And that confidence now showing in our early results. If you take a look at the bottom of the screen there, Sask Party leading in 14 ridings, NDP in 3. And we have some result boards that we're going to bring up here for you.
Yeah, I can take you some of our early results here. Looking at the battle furs, that's Herb Cox's old riding. Jeremy Cockrell taking an early lead there by 169 votes over Amber Stewart of the NDP. And going to Saskatoon University, this is a rematch of the last time. Basically, no significant results between these two. You can expect to see Olawson and Jennifer Bowes going head-to-head. It'll be one of the close ones for sure, Allison.
Regina Gardner Park, this is former Rough Rider Gene Mikowski's territory. This is also a rematch of the 2016 election. You can see, obviously, not very many results in so far, only a 2-vote lead for Gene Mikowski there. And in Regina Northeast, Gary Gruel actually taking an early lead over incumbent Jens Peterson. This is another rematch, but only from the 2018 by-election. When Jens Peterson actually flipped the riding, it was a Sask Party MLA had held it beforehand. And in Swift Current, of course, this is former Premier Brad Wall's former riding. Everett Hindley taking an early lead, 78% of the vote right now over Stefan Rumpel. Again, another rematch. In 2018, they were up in the by-election once Brad Wall had stepped down. And of course, Everett Hindley is the incumbent there.
And of course, Everett Hindley also has a history as being a staffer of Brad Wall.
Yes, executive assistant, yep.
That territory is pretty safe for the Sask Party, one would think. To talk a little bit about some of these early results and what we're seeing, let's go to Jackie Wilson now and Greg Peltzer in our Saskatoon studio. Jackie?
Ryan, Allison, thank you so much. We have been talking about the pandemic. No doubt it has affected voters, voter turnout, and how people have been able to campaign. And Greg Peltzer joins him now. He's a University of Saskatchewan poli-sci prof. Greg, take me through your thoughts. How has this pandemic, first of all, let's talk about campaigning itself. Right. Has it worked in favor of either of the parties?
You'd have to think it favors the incumbent. They've got the organization, and that's massive in terms of organizing, especially the early voting. So it's both mail-in voting, which we've seen record numbers obviously on this election, but also the advanced polls. And that ability to get out the vote for advanced polls often favors the incumbent party. We saw it in British Columbia just recently, and I expect that's going to favor the Sask Party in this election.
Let's talk about the campaign themselves for each of the party. Let's start with the Sask Party. They are saying we are the party, a strong Saskatchewan, strong recovery. Was that the right thing to say?
I think so in many regards, because Scott Moe was trying to project himself as the steady hand on the tiller. And if you look at our COVID numbers in Saskatchewan, when we compare it to our neighboring western provinces and indeed across Canada, we're doing well. On the economic front, we're one of the strongest economies in Canada. And so those staying safe and staying on that course is probably the right message for the Sask Party. That makes it a big challenge for the NDP, because it's always hard to run against a strong economy, a relatively strong economy. But I think the NDP made a really wise choice. They went back to boilerplate, what the activist base in particular like to see, and Ryan Meili put that out there. He really made a stark choice for voters, and that was probably a good strategy for the NDP as well.
You know, we have had reporters out all day. I went to vote. There was not a lot of lines out at voter stations. Do you think people are nervous to turn up to vote during a pandemic? How could this affect the vote? Yeah,
if there's a low voter turnout, and if the Sask Party was successful in getting a lot of their vote out in the early voting, that's probably going to mean a good night for the Sask Party. And why voters not turning out as much on election day? Obviously, COVID is one factor for sure, hence the high turnout in early voting. And the other thing is this kind of foregone conclusion. People expect the Sask Party to win, so that can lead to a little bit of voter complacency if you already think you know what the outcome is before you've cast your ballot.
Let's flip that and talk a little bit about the NDP voters. They're on the opposite side of that. If Sask Party is worried about complacency, NDP has strong voters and they're very organized. How so?
They are, and traditionally NDP are strong, especially with public sector unions. But there's another dimension to this election that we haven't seen before, and that's the strength of teachers. And you think about August, you think about the rollout of the COVID plan, and the high anxiety. We saw that right across Canada, and we saw that here in Saskatchewan, worried about kids in the classroom and teachers in the classroom. And that, I think, is going to have mobilized a lot of the teachers. Indeed, we've got, I think, 14 candidates.
14 for NDP.
That are teachers, exactly. So. And that matters. Teachers and unions are organized, and that helps the NDP, especially for getting out the vote on election day.
Okay, we'll see how it goes as the results are coming in. Ryan, Allison, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Jackie. Interesting point about the organization of the NDP, getting support from the unions, possibly mobilizing some teachers, because of course we saw the back-to-school plan this fall, raising a lot of eyebrows among teachers, among families. I'm curious if that turns into an issue that actually moves the needle tonight.
Well, and Greg talks about possible Sask Party voter complacency, but we're looking at our boards now. Sask Party leading in 36 ridings right now, a big jump from what we saw. They were at 14 a few minutes ago. NDP leading in 6 of those ridings. Of course, we're not seeing any elected so far. Taking a look at the popular vote, Sask Party sitting at 66%. Now, that 60% mark is where you're going to be looking when you're talking about a majority government.
Of course, and it is not a perfect science, though, because you can see widespread support for the Sask Party in rural ridings. This is a smaller example of it when you look at Weyburn-Big Muddy.
Absolutely. Weyburn-Big Muddy, a fairly safe seat for the Sask Party. Dustin Duncan has held that seat since 2006. Of course, he is the Environment Minister and responsible for Sask Power as well.
An early lead in Prince Albert Carleton for SGI Minister Joe Hargrave, a 72-vote lead there. This is interesting, though, because he is one of those cabinet ministers that I would say is probably most at risk at possibly losing his seat to the NDP.
And we've talked about this riding. Regina Pasqua, one of the closest races in 2016. As you can see, incumbent Mohamed Fayez only with a 32-vote lead against NDP candidate Bajan Brar. And in Moosomin, a fairly safe seat for Stephen Bonk, incumbent Sask Party MLA there. Moosomin has never elected an NDP MLA, so it's definitely an uphill battle for Ken Burton. And in Yorkton, Greg Ottenbright, 61-vote lead there. He is the Minister of Highways and Infrastructure. Fairly safe riding for him tonight, I would say as well.
Yeah, and Greg Ottenbright currently holding the portfolio of Highways and Infrastructure. Very important to people who live around Yorkton. Absolutely. On Highway 16, right? So that's perhaps an example of where your portfolio can also help your local electoral chances. I also just want to refer our voters and viewers to the bottom of our screen. You can see the Sask Party is leading in 36 ridings, so that is above that 31 threshold. The popular vote number is important. We saw that above 60, but again, not a perfect science. 36 is not the number of elected, but it is 36 leading, and that is significant for the Saskatchewan Party.
Absolutely, and of course, as things shake out tonight, undoubtedly will have an impact with Saskatchewan's relationship with Ottawa, and that's where we're going to go now to our Mark Carcassole and Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson. Mark?
Yeah, Allison, definitely the results of any provincial election anywhere in the country can have an impact on what happens in Ottawa, probably Saskatchewan, more so than many other provinces. The relationships between the Prime Minister and Premiers, incredibly important, and you've seen the way that Scott Moe and Justin Trudeau butted heads various times over the course of just the last year. And they're especially important right now during a pandemic. There are a number of outcomes that could happen tonight, and with more on how those outcomes could impact Parliament Hill, let's bring in Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson now. Mercedes, this is obviously your beat. This is what you're keeping an eye on. And as I mentioned, Scott Moe and Justin Trudeau have had, a tumultuous relationship at times, smoothed over at other times. There are a number of things that could come out of tonight's election. What do you see as potential impacts that could ripple down to Ottawa?
Well, there's basically three potential impacts that I think could be really interesting. The first one is if Scott Moe wins and the Saskatchewan Party maintains their majority. Now, on the one hand, that means no change in the relationship here in Ottawa. And you know that while Scott Moe and Justin Trudeau have warmed their relationship up, as many of the premiers have during this pandemic, because there's so much cooperation between the federal government and the provincial government, but there's no love lost between those two. And even right before the throne speech here in Ottawa, Scott Moe penned a letter to Justin Trudeau asking the Prime Minister not to raise the carbon tax again, which they did, asking for sectoral bailouts and support for the oil and gas industry. Federal government hasn't done that. So if you have a situation where there is in fact another majority there, Scott Moe is very much seen as part of that term, the resistance, the premiers who go against Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And I think you'll continue to see a relationship that is functional, but certainly has its tensions with two people that have very different priorities and ideological outlooks on the world. If Scott Moe ends up with a minority government, it is an interesting situation because he has to negotiate potentially a little bit more, but he has to worry far more about his relationship with the NDP than he does with the federal government in that case. And then, of course, if this flips and becomes an NDP government, very different situation altogether, one where I think you would see much more common ground between the NDP outlook and the federal government's outlook.
Certainly, given the power that the NDP has had in Ottawa, propping up the government and confidence motions and whatnot, an NDP win in Saskatchewan would be something very big for the government federally, I would think.
Yeah, it's a lot more sort of similar goals, similar outlooks, similar ways of looking at how they think you should approach the pandemic, how they approach the economics and the spending. It's really interesting because federal NDPs and provincial NDPs tend to be quite different in a way that often other parties are not. But there's no question that they're more ideologically aligned with the Liberals than Saskatchewan Party is, even though in Saskatchewan, of course, it encompasses both Conservative and Liberal votes. So it'll be very interesting to see where some of those Liberal votes, federal Liberal votes that were Saskatchewan Party in the last election go tonight if Scott Moe manages to hold on to them.
All right, thank you for that. So very interesting stuff here. We're looking at a popular vote that's significantly in the Sask Party's favor. We're looking at a seat count around 42 for leading and elected right now. The NDP actually down 2 seats from where they were at coming into this race. I think that's probably a sign of concern for the New Democrats.
Still early in the night, and we're still looking at leading versus the elected. But yes, NDP right now down 2 seats from the 13, and we're looking at the popular vote here in Regina. So interesting to see the Sask Party and NDP are actually closer in popular vote than they are when you're just looking at the entire province, and that is because of the Sask Party's popular vote in the rural areas.
You can see the Sask Party skewing a little bit better than the NDP in Saskatoon. Not entirely surprising. Regina is usually a more New Democrat-friendly city than Saskatoon. Saskatoon also has some high-profile cabinet ministers. You can see the commanding lead in terms of the popular vote for the Sask Party. Again, largely in the urban areas. We actually have a riding that I believe has elected a Saskatchewan Party candidate. There it is.
Rural riding, Arm River elected Dana Skoropad. No surprise here. This was held by MLA Greg Burkich. So it's very safe riding. And we actually have some breaking news to share with you tonight. We are declaring a Sask Party majority. This will mark the 4th consecutive term for the Sask Party.
4th term for the Sask Party. The first one for Scott Moe, though, because, of course, this emerging political dynasty started under the reign of Brad Walsh. So it's a big night for the Sask Party. It's a big night for Scott Moe. And now the question is what happens with all of these close races? We do see a lot of NDP support happening within the cities.
In the cities, and it'll be interesting to see if those seats will flip or not. But right now, Sask Party leading and elected in 45 seats. Of course, Global News projecting a majority government.
Yeah, that is very important for the Sask Party. But again, the NDP right now where we're sitting, you look at that seat count, 13 for the New Democrats. That's exactly where they were when when the legislature was dissolved, when the writ period began. Can the NDP squeak out anything new?
It'll be interesting to see if they can make any gains at all. And if they do, obviously, I would think that would be maybe considered a win for them. But if they make any losses, that's you're looking at a disappearing party at that point.
We've spoken to some pundits during this campaign who say the bar is frankly relatively low for the New Democrats. Any gain in terms of seats is good news. If they're hanging around that 13 mark, I mean, what do you call that? It's not good news. It's not bad news. Really, and one of those swing seats is the one that belongs to Ryan Meili. So it's fascinating to see how this might pan out, Allison.
Absolutely. And we're actually trying to get to the Sask Party headquarters, I believe, where Kyle Benning is standing by.
Live television.
Live television. We're having
somebody
some
find
there.
Kyle.
We will eventually have reaction, though. Oh, I think we are going to Kyle. And Kyle, we've had breaking news for us, our viewers this evening. We're projecting a Saskatchewan Party government majority. Of course, this is the party's 4th consecutive term in office. Like we said, Scott Moe's first time leading the party to a victory. We're still trying to get Kyle here on the line.
Well, we can talk a little bit more about this. Scott Moe is very well respected in his riding, first elected in 2011. I'm hearing now Kyle Benning is ready to go from Sask Party headquarters in Saskatoon. So Kyle, take it away.
Ryan, a majority government for the Saskatchewan Party. Obviously, a big announcement for Scott Moe in his first as leader for the party. Obviously, here today, it's not as big of a celebration as it would be because of the COVID pandemic. But rather than having volunteers and some celebration going on, I heard one lone woo out in the other room. So obviously a big announcement here, and I can imagine that it's just a matter of time where we're seeing how many number of seats the Sask Party has. Ryan?
I like that. I'm glad there was at least one supporter in the room to celebrate, because this is a big night for the Sask Party. You know those celebrations are going on. It is really just a matter of those COVID-19 restrictions that are really putting a damper on the party, but celebrate nonetheless.
Yeah, and well, the NDP headquarters is experiencing the same thing. It's mostly media there, less party and candidates, and that's actually where we're going to go next. NDP headquarters in downtown Saskatoon, where Anna McMillan is standing by. Anna, we've projected a Sask Party majority. The NDP NDP right now sitting at 13 leading seats. What's the mood like where you're at?
Well, Kyle had one lone woo. The atmosphere here has not shifted at all. Keep in mind, it's really only reporters in the room, and it's also not surprising to see that Sask Party majority call, right? I don't think many NDP supporters were expecting their party to form government tonight, but that doesn't mean that the night is over for the NDP. There's still a chance for them to pick up seats. It could still be a big night. We heard our political analyst, Greg Peltzer, say that, they could have upwards of 20 seats, and if that were to happen, that could be considered a victory for the party. One thing I want to quickly flag, though, is that Ryan Meili is currently losing by a very narrow margin in Saskatoon-Meewasin, so we'll keep a close eye on that, because if they lose that, then that's obviously going to be a big hit for the party tonight. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Anna. And of course, she said the NDP, still has that chance to pick up those seats. But Ryan Meili's Saskatoon-Meewasin, that's going to be a riding to watch because, like she said, if Ryan loses that seat, where do you go from there?
That's where a successful night begins, not ends for the New Democrats. So we're going to keep an eye on that throughout the evening. But let's bring in David Aitken now. Again, David, we have declared a Sask Party majority here. Just tell us how we got here.
Yeah, well, basically the Sask Party is holding what they started the night with. In fact, they've gained a couple. And again, we're watching one of those. I've got Saskatoon right behind me up in front of the screen. And of course, that's Saskatoon-Meewasin right there. There it is, Ryland Hunter. He is 50.5% to 47% for Ryan Meili. That's essentially what's going on here. I mean, the only way the NDP were counting on trying to bust out, maybe win some more in Prince Albert, more in Moose Jaw, so far not happening. Moose Jaw, everything looks the same there. Same thing in Prince Albert. One thing I do want to just sort of touch on, which is one of the reasons we want to stay with the program tonight. You don't want to go anywhere. Don't be flicking around just because it's a majority. There is a potential that the NDP could start climbing back and seeing more seats, and let me explain. Let's take a riding, for example. I'm going to just pick one here. There we are. Saskatoon University. The incumbent is Eric Lawson. Right now, he's way behind. Jennifer Bose is up there at 66%, okay? Now, that's a pretty good lead. But here's what might happen. Let's say you're voting at St. Peter's School in that particular riding. There's about 4 or 5 polls. You go into the gym in the school. 4 or 5 polls, and each of those poll boxes has a couple of hundred ballots. Those are the results we're seeing now. What's coming out of a box with 200 or 300 votes. In this particular riding, again, we're talking about Saskatoon University. In this particular riding, there were 4,000 advanced votes cast. That's huge. Where do those advanced polls go? There's only 4 advanced polls. So then you've got a box with 1,000 votes. Okay? Bear with me. In Saskatchewan, unlike some other jurisdictions, people count them by hand. 1, 2, 3. That's how it works. So all the boxes with just a few hundred votes, they're coming in right now. Advanced votes with 1,000 votes in them will come in late in the evening. You've heard early in the evening that there's a good chance that the NDP may be a bit more motivated. They've got unions often working on their behalf. And if they flooded the advance votes, those are big chunks of votes that could come later and now start to tip some things towards the NDP. The alternate reality is Conservative parties across the country, generally speaking, federal Conservatives, the UCP in Alberta, they're very good at advance votes too. And if they have stacked it up in those advance polls, they are going to really start running the table towards the end of the night. So just to tell you that, yeah, we've got a majority. It's Scott Moe is going to have a majority government. I don't think that's such a surprise. What I'm waiting to see is how these advance polls then start to turn it for the NDP, and possibly how the mail-in ballots at the end also may turn it one way or the other. Still lots of stuff to watch as the night goes on.
Now, David, I just want you to bring up the map for a second. I believe that was Saskatoon-Riversdale that was looking green. That's Danielle Chartier's former riding. For the Sask Party to get in there and pick up that seat, that would be very significant, would it not be?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, sorry, you were saying Saskatoon-Riversdale was what you want to look. This is what we've got right now. Marv Friesen, Sask Party, NDP's Ashley Hicks is up. Yes, I mean, I think there's going to be some change in the Saskatoon ridings. I think that's where, of course, that's Ryan Meili's sort of hometown. And now we see, by the way, as we've been chatting, he's back up on top. But look at that, 48.9% to 48.6%. Again, as particularly, I go back to these advanced polls, in the leaders riding, you definitely want to have all the volunteers voting early in the leaders riding so they can spread out in the rest of the city. You know, they might be needed, I think, they're going to be needed in Saskatoon Westview. That's close. David Buckingham's the incumbent there in Westview. This is a riding the NDP had to pick up. It's like, you know, in the top 5 of the must-have seats, and they're back 51.6% to 43.3%. So, I'll go back to Saskatoon and get the big look there. Come on, there we are. Back to Saskatoon. So there's some more orange on the map. Remember, this is 2016. And here's 2020 as it sits right now. So I think there's still lots of interesting races, and you can see on the ticker below us, the NDP are now leading or elected in 15. But still, Sask Party at 45, very solid win for Scott Moe if that's the way it holds. Guys?
Great stuff. Thanks for that, David. One vote.
One vote. I saw
Ryan
that too.
Meili
Yeah.
and Ryland Hunter.
Yeah, we talk about the strong win for Scott Moe, but it's neck and neck for Ryan Meili right now just to get his seat.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, let's go to the Saskatoon studio now. We can turn to Jackie Wilson and political scientist Greg Peltzer to essentially give us some analysis on what's behind this Sask Party majority.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ryan and Allison. So as we've mentioned, Sask Party majority, no surprise there. But let's keep in mind that 46 you see there is leading and elected, but that's not necessarily a thumbs up or a thumbs down, right? If NDP end up with 14, that would be a loss. What would you say if you were a leader of either party as a win or lose scenario?
Well, if those numbers stay the way they are and you're Scott Moe, you got to be happy.
Yeah.
Because you've come through COVID. Yeah, okay, you've lost one seat if it stays there. But it's pretty much status quo. For the NDP, though, of all the times you think about the big criticism about the rollout plan around COVID, mobilization of the teachers, and finally, for a lot of the activists, the platform they wanted to see that they had not seen in the previous 2 elections, where some people are calling the NDP platform basically Sask Party light. And now they have this, and they cannot make a breakthrough. If they stay at a number like around 14, 15 seats, it really questions the viability of the NDP as a party that can be competitive in Saskatchewan.
If Ryan Meili wins in Saskatoon-Meewasin, but the party only sticks around 14, does he step down anyways?
That's a really big question, because they'll be marginally better than they were, and that's going to be a really big question. So I think also it depends who comes into caucus, who's re-elected. Are they going to be MLAs that are going to be supportive of the vision that Ryan Meili wants to go? Or is it going to be a majority that want to see something more to the center and to try and be that center lane in Saskatchewan politics? And if they're in the majority and the party's in the majority, then Ryan Meili's leadership, I think, will be in question.
Let's talk about your prediction for the night. You can see there for our viewers at the bottom of the screen, NDP is 14 leading and elected. Certainly where they are now, that they're hoping for higher. You think it's going to be higher?
I do. I think the NDP are going to end up doing better than we're seeing now. Part of it is large numbers of the votes within the cities are starting, and you see some of the movement going back and forth within the cities. So I think it's a long ways away yet, and that's really where the NDP are going to make their big gains, if anywhere, in the cities. In rural Saskatchewan, that's a lock. All you need is a few polls, and you know where that's going. So I don't think the numbers are going to really change that much for rural Saskatchewan. It's really the cities we got to watch.
Okay, we will have to wait and see if that number can go higher. Ryan, Allison, back to you.
All right, thank you for that, Jackie. Thank you, Greg. Interesting stuff there, again, around sort of the future and the identity of the New Democrats. I don't know if you would call 14 leading and elected
a win or
a win. I don't know if it's a loss. I don't know if it's an identity crisis.
Yep.
Greg was referencing where does the NDP go if that number solidifies around 14?
Right. Well, a party that seems to not be having an identity crisis right now is the Saskatchewan Party, with leading and elected in 46 seats. Right now, we're taking a look at the riding Arm River, where we have told you Dana Skoropat has been elected. No surprise there. This is a long-time Sask Party stronghold. Weyburn Big Muddy, same kind of story. This is a Minnesota Minister, though, Dustin Duncan, elected Minister of Environment and Sask Power. 76% of the vote so far over Regan Lanning. Again, no surprise.
Into Lloydminster, this one is not even close. It's Colleen Young over Colleen Morrill-Henning. Colleen Young re-elected. I believe that's her second term representing Lloydminster. 1,300 vote margin there. Martinsville-Warman. Okay, this is interesting stuff. Terry Jensen. This is a Sask Party stronghold. Terry Jensen is a new candidate there. This was a vacant riding. Jensen is the owner of the Clark's Crossing Gazette community newspaper in that area. So this not only is an electoral result for Terry Jensen, it makes you wonder what becomes of that community newspaper. And Wade Sierra at just 6% of the vote. He is the Buffalo Party leader. It seems like there's not a lot of support in his riding for the party's leader.
No, and Melville Saltcoats, Warren Kading, Minister of Rural and Remote Health, re-elected for his second term now, not even close. Again, 74% of the vote right now. Currently, of course, votes are still coming in. Polls only reporting 16 out of 53. So, of course, that can fluctuate, but he has been elected.
And again, not to be totally doom and gloom on the New Democrats here, they are up to 15 seats now and leading and elected. Those ridings that we showed you were all primarily rural ridings, or the smaller
no
community.
Surprise there. Yeah.
So for the Sask Party to do extremely well there is not entirely surprising, as you say. There could still be some glimmers of hope for the New Democrats.
Where we're going to see those is in the urban ridings for sure. And of course, David Akin said advanced polls could play a big part, and we're not going to know those results until later on in the evening. So that's a reason to stick around. We already know we have a Sask Party majority, but there are still a lot of races left to be won, and we'll take a look at those close races after a short break. Welcome back to Decision Saskatchewan. Like we've told you, Global News is projecting a Sask Party majority government. As you can see on the bottom of your screen there right now, Sask Party leading and elected in 44 seats, NDP in 16 seats, which is actually up from where they were at dissolution. But a lot of close races in the urban areas, and that's where we're seeing a lot of the NDP popular vote rise. We actually have some boards for you here. In Regina, actually, NDP and Sask Party neck and neck, tied at 46% for the popular vote there. That's going to indicate that these races are going to be tight.
For sure, and let's take a look at Saskatoon now, skewing a little bit more towards the Sask Party, but 43% for the New Democrats is still a relatively healthy figure when you factor in the fact that this is a Saskatchewan Party majority government. I will direct you again to the bottom. It's up to 17 for the New Democrats now, so we're seeing a bit of a pendulum swing. Just moments ago, we were talking about the potential future of Ryan Meili and the New Democrats. They're trailing in the popular vote, but we are seeing that pendulum swing back towards the New Democrats just a little bit here. So certainly there's still a lot to play out this evening, Allison.
Absolutely, and that's now where we're going to go, is the Sask Party headquarters in Regina, where Colton Prale is standing by. Colton, a lot of close races that we're going to be tracking in Regina throughout the night.
Absolutely, Allison. You know, you talk about that focus on urban ridings. There may not be a ton of atmosphere in these rooms tonight, but when the first polls came in, there were screams of excitement from the Sask Party members in attendance. This is where they are really paying attention to tonight. Reg Downs, Senior Advisor to the Premier, is joining us now. Reg, one of the areas that you guys are leading right now is in Regina Northeast. Now, that's a seat the NDP did hold for 12 years, but you guys have had it the last two elections. I was speaking earlier with some Sask Party members. They said this was a sneaky seat that they thought they could keep a hold of in this election. How important is it to see Gary leading?
Yeah, I think we're going to win that seat back tonight. It's obviously going to be very close. We'll be watching the results late into the evening and maybe beyond this evening, because the mail-in ballots still need to be counted in a couple of days from now. So that one's going to be close, but we think Gary ran a great campaign there and is going to win it back from the NDP who won it in the by-election.
We know how tight these Regina ridings have been, I should say, split right down the middle heading into this election. One riding that popped up is Regina Wall Shakers. Now, that's an NDP stronghold. The Sask Party has only had that 2 times. Derek Myers has a real shot at it. How important is it for you guys to secure that?
Yeah, again, I think that's one we're going to win, partly because Derek ran a great campaign there, and partly because of the, I would say, mishandling of the candidate situation by Ryan Meili and the NDP, booting out their nominated candidate just days before the election was called, and effectively ending up with 2 NDP candidates running in that riding that are probably going to split the vote and ensure that Derek wins.
You know, in a city where these ridings are coming down to so little. How impactful was that for you to see that opportunity present itself?
Oh, well, you know, it's important to try and win every seat that is possible for us in Regina. We want to have strong representation in Regina, in Saskatoon, in Prince Albert, and Moose Jaw, in addition to obviously likely sweeping every rural seat in the province.
Reg, we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Allison, one other thing to note is the Buffalo Party in rural ridings. They're polling second in Estevan and Kindersley. That's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Definitely that will be, considering those are Sask Party, generally Sask Party strongholds. So definitely something to keep an eye on there. Also, they were mentioning the close races in Walsh Acres, Regina Northeast. A lot of close races that we were expecting already because they were so close last time around. Now we're talking with analysts saying that NDP, get out in vote strength. That's going to make those races, you would think, even closer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to jump back to, I think that Colton said for a second there, for the Buffalo Party to be running second in some of these rural ridings, it's an interesting development, especially given the result that we saw earlier where Wade Sierra, the leader of the party, had just a marginal share, around 6%. Let's bring in David Aiken now. David's got his touchscreen as always, and he's ready to show us some tight races in the cities. David?
Yeah, and just before I do that, you mentioned the rural ridings. Let me just chat about that for a second, because we were talking about popular vote. 70% popular vote for the Sask Party. I'll tell you why, because they're running up the score of course, in rural areas. I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Lloydminster. Let's take a look at that. As I predicted, Colleen Young is way ahead, 84% of the votes. You got 88% last time. In Regina, you can see the popular vote there is 46% for the Sask Party, 45% for the NDP. I think Sask Party is overperforming there in Saskatoon. 52% for the Sask Party, 44% for the NDP. It's the NDP leader's hometown. You think that he might be doing a little better there. So those are the popular votes in Saskatoon and Regina, and we're seeing a lot of change in both of those cities. If you just come back to me for a second, let's take a look at the map. Let's start with some of the change. This is 2016 in Regina, and how's it looking tonight? Whole lot more orange. Once again, 2016. Here's 2020 right now. And where's the change? First of all, in Regina Pasqua, Bajan Brar is up. Look, here's the 46.2 to 42.8. It's still a very close race. We go down to Regina University. There she is, a new mom, 47.7. But look at that. Tina Beaudry-Miller, the cabinet minister, 46.1. And then Coronation Park. We've talked about that. Mark Doherty, the Speaker of the House, is behind for Noor Burki. So once again, there's your change in Regina. Let's take a look now at Saskatoon. 2016. This is, again, 2016. We're not counting the by-elections here. And now 2020. There is some orange, but, and I think, Ryan, you mentioned this. I'd missed it. You're right. Look at that. In Riversdale, the New Democrats, they're the incumbent party there, and they are behind, although not by much, 90 votes down there in Riversdale. And we talked about mail-in ballots. We've been talking about that. Mail-in ballots won't be counted for 2 days. There's as many as 900 votes out there on mail-in ballots for Riversdale. Some pickups. There's a pickup. Saskatoon University, Jennifer Bowes in a rematch against Erica Lawson. Jennifer Bowes, she's got a good 10-point lead, couple hundred votes. That just might hold. There's the close one again. Ryan Meili now opening it up a little bit, 75, 80-point lead for Ryan Meili over Ryland Hunter. And one more we want to take a look at is Saskatoon Westview. David Buckingham beat Cam Broughton here last time. He was a bit of a giant killer. And Malik Draz, we thought he would be doing pretty well. This is among the top 5 must-haves for the NDP. So right now the NDP leading or elected in 15, and that's what it looks like sort of in the cities, Regina and Saskatoon. That's where all the change is happening, pretty much everywhere else. And one more thing, just before you talked about that, you're quite right. We go down to this part of the province. That is where, for example, we see the Buffalo Party in second place with 16.2% of the vote. That's cut knife Turtleford. I suspect you might see more of that. The last time this part of the province voted NDP Alan Blakeney in 1971, and there was no Conservative Party on the ballot. It was vote Blakeney or vote for the Liberals. That was it. But that's the last time the NDP have shown any strength in that quarter of the province. 1971. You guys weren't born yet. I was very, very young at the time. So there you are. Anyways, back to you guys.
Well, David, we won't be sharing our birth dates and birth years on the air, but thank you for that. Definitely interesting to see how these rural-urban divides are starting to shape up.
Yeah. Interesting to see on the map there showing Regina essentially taking a 180 from last time around. I believe the Sask Party had 8 seats in Regina last time around. Now the NDP is encroaching on that 8 seats there. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out in the urban areas.
And I'm watching this seat counter just below our screen here. It's down to 15 now for the New Democrats. Moments ago, it was 17. If that's not an indicator of all of these close races, I don't know what is. Yeah. It is amazing to watch it go back and forth, Alison.
And one of those close races, Regina University, where, as David said, we're seeing new mom, Alina Young, NDP, leading incumbent and advanced education minister Tina Beaudry-Miller. I believe it was less than 100 votes there. So that is going to be one to watch. Perhaps even one we might not know the results, the final results for tonight.
We've just got those mail-in ballots sort of hanging over our heads here, sort of dictating the course of the night, frankly, because there have been a lot of seats that we just have not called because of that factor, Alison. Absolutely, yeah, and that's why you see the leading and elected 46 for the Sask Party, 15 NDP, and that's why we're going to see that fluctuate throughout the night. And then Wednesday, that's when the mail-in ballots start counting. So eventually we'll maybe find out more of these results. But yeah, Wednesday is when they start counting those mail-in ballots. It could take a few days after that as well. Yeah, no doubt. And I believe we've got some interesting developments here in Rosthern-Shellbrook. This is Scott Moe. He has been re-elected in his riding. Not a gigantic surprise. He was first elected in 2011. He held some high-profile cabinet positions, including advanced education, the environment, going on to win the leadership race. And of course, he took over for someone that we're about to hear from just now. Right now, we've got former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall on the line. Hopefully he can hear me. Sir, can you hear me?
I can.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, I'm just hoping for your reaction to seeing the Sask Party holding around that 46-seat mark. What's your thoughts?
Well, it's a big night. I mean, the last time a political party in Saskatchewan won 4 majority governments was the Tommy Douglas-led CCF. So it's a big achievement for the party, and congratulations to Premier Moe and the team. I noticed that David Akin was going over that Regina map there, and I thought it was important to point out that the Saskatchewan Party is pretty confident, I think, of the advance poll turnout, and the advance polls are counted last. So in the case of Tina Beaudry-Miller, who has been an excellent cabinet minister and a very good MLA in Regina University, and other seats like hers, where it's very close, I would encourage global viewers to wait for those advanced polls to come in, be counted last tonight. They may, in fact, decide things, and I think the Saskatchewan Party is feeling pretty good about how the votes turned out in the advanced polls.
And I'm just looking at our seat counter now. It has now fallen by another seat to 14 for the New Democrats. That's 4 more than the NDP eked out in 2016 when you were leader of the Saskatchewan Party. I'm just wondering, is there any concern when you see the New Democrats pick up seats at all, or is the Sask Party, content with a number like this one?
Well, I don't think a party should ever be content, even though it looks like Scott and the team are headed for a big win tonight. And they ran a very good campaign and provided good leadership for the province through the pandemic. I don't think that any party should ever be content. We should always be earnest. We should be working to keep our promises. I used to say on election night that it was great that we won tonight, but we haven't earned anything yet. We'll have to earn it in the years ahead. And it's a pretty good attitude, I think, for any government, whatever the stripe, to have as a goal, as a reminder on an election night like this, which is a big win by any count. I mean, to win the 4th majority with the numbers that we're seeing, notwithstanding some small changes that have happened, it's a huge achievement, and I think a credit to the party. But at the end of the day, they're going to want to earn every bit of support they got tonight, and obviously want to represent and work for those that didn't vote for them as well.
And just my final question for you here. We've got about 30 seconds left. Simply put, what do you see as the future of the Saskatchewan Party?
Well, I think the future will be about the economy. I mean, Premier Moe did a good job at the start of the campaign of framing it, of casting the ballot question that I think was the ballot question that resonated with Saskatchewan voters, which was which party, which leader gives Saskatchewan the best chance to come out of this recovery strong. And think about what happened during the campaign. External data came into the province that sort of reinforced that the answer to that question in favor of the Saskatchewan Party, including the lowest unemployment rate in the country here in Saskatchewan, the fact that chartered banks were increasing their economic outlook for the province, the fact that 87%, the highest in the country, of Saskatchewan workers were able to stay working during the pandemic, and very significantly, just before the campaign, one of the major international credit rating agencies affirmed Saskatchewan's AAA credit rating, something that we were able to earn about 4 or 5 years ago. Think about that. That's a report card on the province's finances, and in this case, a AAA, the highest rating you can get. I think there's only one other province that has it. Second lowest GDP to debt ratio as well. All those things, all those factors, I think, reinforced the Saskatchewan Party's case that they were the best option in terms of leading our province out of the pandemic.
All right, former Saskatchewan Premier Brad Wall, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, so interesting stuff from the Premier there, talking about sort of the future and really the lasting legacy. I think it is fair at this point to call this a political dynasty in Saskatchewan, 4 consecutive majority governments.
It's huge, and interesting to know, I really enjoyed when he said the win tonight doesn't mean they've earned it yet. They earn it in the years to come. Right. Talking about earning your seat, look at this. The Buffalo Party trying to earn their seat in the Kindersley riding. They became second to elect Ken Francis of the Sask Party. Of course, he was the incumbent. He has been elected, but very strong showing from the Buffalo Party, I would say. Also in Cannington, Daryl Harrison has been elected for the Sask Party. This is a Sask Party stronghold, only ever been held by 2 MLAs, a Sask Party and a Progressive Conservative, but Buffalo Party making a strong showing for sure. And making strides up north as well, Cut Knife Turtleford, Ryan Domitar. This is his first kick at the can for politics. And when it's your first go round and you have an 1,800, almost 1,900 vote lead, I think Mr. Domitar is very happy this evening. Buffalo Party, though, sitting at third in that riding. And Estevan here, Buffalo Party sitting second. Lori Carr, though, the incumbent Minister of Government Relations, she has 59% of the vote right now. No surprise there. But look at the spread. I mean, it's only 1,000 votes. Yeah, that's significant for the Buffalo Party. Cypress Hills, Doug Steele has been re-elected for a second term. Again, Buffalo Party taking second over the NDP. 21% of the vote there, 63 of course though for Sask Party. No surprise with a 1,200 vote lead right now. And just 277 for the New Democrats. The NDP hasn't really drawn strength in the rural areas in such a long time other than the northern ridings, but to trail by such a large margin, for the NDP to be successful going forward, they have to break ground in one of these rural ridings. They need to start picking up rural ridings. Yeah, but right now, I guess tonight, they are hoping maybe for the urban ridings, and then they continue that rebuild in the years to come. Especially in Regina, I would say. Especially in Regina, and that's actually where we're going now, but the Sask Party headquarters in Regina, where Colton Prail is standing by. Colton?
Thanks, Allison. You mentioned the Buffalo Party. One of the most interesting polling results we saw leading up to this election was from Angus Reid in mid-October, where they reported 2/3 of Saskatchewan residents wanted a stronger opposition voice in the legislature. That doesn't necessarily mean the official opposition, just a secondary voice, and that includes 40% of Sask Party respondents. Right now, the Buffalo Party is in second in 5 ridings across the province. That's got to be a concern for the Sask Party. Those are votes that they think they should have. I actually had a chance to ask Scott Moe about that last week. I said, Scott, is this a concern for you? He responded that concern isn't the word he would use. His party tries not to govern by ideology, but he did say it was important to pay attention to those voices, to have public conversations across the political spectrum. He pointed to the discussion they had about returning to school. That was a very public discussion had in the public and in the legislature. He said that was an example of what they're trying to do, to hear voices across the political spectrum. But again, he said concern isn't the word they would use for the Buffalo Party votes. Allison?
Thanks, Colton. Now, interesting to see that the Buffalo Party is picking up steam in those rural ridings for sure, beating out the NDP and probably taking some of those votes away from the Sask Party.
But you also need to look, I think, at where the Buffalo Party decided to place its candidates. I believe it was only 17. So mathematically, you can't even elect a majority government. The party continually saying through the campaign that they wanted to be the opposition party. But it also makes you wonder, why run them in such safe Sask Party ridings? There may be more people who are friendly towards the Buffalo Party there, but if you're the Buffalo Party and if you're thinking strategically and you really want to get a footprint in the legislature, I don't think you can do it in ridings that are so safe towards the Sask Party.
That's a good point, and a point I think that Jackie and Greg Peltzer probably want to touch on here. We're going to go to our Saskatoon studios now.
So, Allison, yeah, we'll get in on this Buffalo Party discussion. Greg Peltzer joins me now. So, Buffalo Party polling second in 4 different ridings currently. What does this signal for you, and what does this signal for the Sask Party?
Yeah, so that shows a shift, and I think when you see the kind of dynamics, the federal-provincial dynamics, and I would say almost a bit of an overheated dynamic coming from Regina to Ottawa, really fan the flames, and you have a very vibrant Buffalo Party. When you're polling over 20% in any riding, 28% as a first-time party, that's strength. What does that mean for the Saskatchewan Party? If you're trying to hug the centre and build out a coalition or a broad-based tent, and now you've got to contend with actually a competitor that's showing some strength, that puts the Premier-elect Moe in a very difficult position of how do you thread the needle of trying to recoup those voters on the right while still appealing to voters in the centre, especially in the cities.
Let's talk about a viable third party. You know, the Buffalo Party, when I was talking to their leader, Wade Sira, he mentioned, I want to be the opposition, put us in, I'll put them to the task. What do you think is the most viable third party, and where would it succeed most?
You betcha. So if you're looking at a viable third party, we had that recent Angus Reid poll showing that over 50% of Saskatchewan residents voters wanted a party in the centre, somewhere between the NDP and the Saskatchewan Party. Well, this is where there's a huge lacuna. There's a big gap there. The Liberal Party used to hold that area. They only running 3 candidates this time. And this is where you can see a little bit, I think, in the dynamic that's playing out now. Where do federal Liberals go if they don't feel at home in the Saskatchewan Party? It doesn't look like they're going in big waves yet to the NDP. So that if there is an opportunity for a third party to be viable, especially in the cities, but also in the rural areas as well, it's probably some kind of a centre party.
Very interesting. What does this signal? I know for lots of voters, maybe in the Sask Party, are thinking, oh, I won't give to the Buffalo Party this time around because I'm going to, strengthen my vote to Sask Party. 4 years from now, are they thinking, I'm putting my vote on the Buffalo Party?
Absolutely, and that, I think that's the real dilemma, because now if you're able to garner that many votes, over 20%, you're running second in a number. Now it's not just a joke party or a fringe party, it's actually starting to become part of the mainstream of Saskatchewan politics. So, and that's something the Buffalo Party can actually champion. And so depending on where the economy goes, where federal relations go in the Sask Party, you could see not only in the next election, but if there's a by-election. And that's where you often see third parties like this come in.
Yeah.
They've ceded the ground to take advantage of that opportunity.
Okay, we'll have to wait for the rest of the night to see how the Buffalo Party popular vote goes. For now, Ryan, Allison, back to you.
Thanks, Jackie. Now, interesting talking about the Buffalo Party picking up steam, maybe becoming a viable third party in the next election. This election, though, of course, there's a lot of close races, but that's between the Sask Party and the NDP, especially in the urban areas.
The Buffalo Party is not getting a lot of support in Regina, let's be frank.
Looking at one of those close races right now, Regina University. Tina Beaudry-Miller now up 36 votes against Alina Young. Alina Young was up, I think, maybe by 100 votes a few minutes ago. go. So that riding there neck and neck. Regina Coronation Park, Mark Doherty, Speaker of the House. This was the closest race in 2016. Mark won his seat by 147 votes. So you can see now he's only leading by 34 votes against Noor Burki. Regina Northeast, another close race. Gary Gruel actually with the lead over incumbent Jens Petersen. Now this is a rematch of the 2018 by-election when Jens Petersen won, taking away this riding from a Sask Party MLA. So I'm sure Gary Gruel is going to want to win this seat back for the Sask Party. Regina Rochdale, actually a closer race than maybe expected. Laura Ross won this quite handily last time around in 2016 against, again, Brett Esty. She is the incumbent. She's been an MLA since 2007. So for her to only have a 330 vote lead right now might be a bit surprising to some people. Regina Walsh Acres, of course, this has been the one up in the air. Everyone's been wondering, is Sandra Morin, former NDP MLA and cabinet minister, going to split the vote with Kelly Hardy? And it kind of looks that way. Derek Myers right now, 45% of the vote, 109 vote lead up on Kelly Hardy NDP, but close race, good one to watch there as well.
And Allison, I'm looking at that graphic, and if you take the independent votes and the NDP votes, doesn't matter which candidate, you put them together, and the Sask Party's in second place.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting race. Another one we're watching, speaking of the NDP in cities, we can't say this enough, it's Saskatoon, Meewasin. I'm just looking at our graph here, and it looks like Ryan Meili is currently in the lead over Ryland Hunter by somewhere between 150 and 170 votes.
Incredibly close. He's got to be holding his breath right now. That's enough to have the mail-in ballots be the big decider there. Yep. So for more on the NDP, it's Anna McMillan. She's in downtown Saskatoon, and we're going to talk a little bit about what the NDP needs to do to build outwards from those cities. Anna?
That's right. Thanks so much, folks. I am here with Sally Hauser. She's the press secretary for the NDP. So, Sally, I want you to tell us a little bit about one of the goals of the party tonight, which is, of course, to push outside of those urban ridings. How did the party try to make that happen during this campaign?
Well, we've been all over the province over the course of the campaign. I was fortunate enough to get to travel in the van and the tour the whole way through, the Yes We van. And, obviously we spent a lot of time in Saskatoon and Regina, Moose Jaw and PA. But we were also in Southie and in Indian Head Milestone riding, in Batush and the Battlefords. So it really is about that growth for the future, and we've got some really excellent candidates running in 61. So it's about that energy and growing the party for the future.
Okay, and so then obviously tonight we did have the majority called for the Saskatchewan Party. That doesn't mean it's the end of the night for the NDP, though. Can you tell me a little bit about how the party is going to continue to push its agenda forward?
Well, absolutely, and I think you see there's still a lot of really tight races, particularly in Regina, and that's where that advance vote comes in. New Democrats have been running really quite strong advance vote strategies for a number of elections now, and certainly ran kind of full election days basically in the advance vote. So you're going to see some tight races come across the line tonight, but you're still going to see a party that puts people first, people who are really going to be able to bring that agenda of holding the government to account, of making sure that the proper investments are made, particularly during this critical time, the coming weeks and months as we keep moving through a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, perfect. Sally, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us. We do have Ryan Meili talking shortly. For now, though, I will throw it back to you, Ryan and Allison.
All right, thanks for that, Anna. And like Anna mentioned there, we are just minutes away from hearing from Ryan Meili. Let's talk a little bit about what Ryan Meili should be saying in that speech, and we'll leave that talk up to the experts. Let's go to Jackie Wilson in our Saskatoon studio with political scientist Greg Peltzer.
I just happen to have an expert sitting with me on the couch right now. So let's pose that question to you, Greg. What do you think Ryan Meili is going to say in his speech that's coming up in a matter of less than 5 minutes here?
Yeah, he's going to obviously thank the supporters, thank the Saskatchewan voters. Mm-hmm. I think it'll be one where he's going to talk about his vision. And he's going to be, I think, probably less overstated than if they were having bigger numbers at this point. The other thing he's going to have is a cautionary note. All votes aren't in. It's a long night. And then, of course, to congratulate the Premier on his victory. Those are the kind of standard things I would kind of expect, given the outcome as we're seeing it right now.
What is it going to signal if Ryan Meili barely squeaks out a win here. Does that hit him in the heart? Do the NDP look for a new leader who can, you know, bring them to a higher popular vote, or do they stick with him?
That's a big question, because right now, they're okay compared to 2016. Yes, they're ahead by 5. You could argue they've got a 50% increase in the number of seats, but it's certainly not what he was expecting to get, I think, and certainly hoping to get, especially over the last couple of weeks. And that's going to be a big question. He's right at that cusp. Does he stay or does he go on these kind of numbers? If he starts moving up over the next couple of days towards 17, then I think he's safe. If he's 15 or drops down to 13, there's going to be a lot of discussions, should there be a new leader.
Dare I ask, I think it's a little too early, but dare I ask who you think would be maybe an alternative leader for the NDP?
Sure, if that question comes to pass, and we're obviously a long ways away from that, but Carla Beck is a name that's been bandied about quite often as a future leader of the party. Nicole Sarr, of course, is another person that's been very capable for the NDP. Trent Weatherspoon, of course, a former leadership contender. So those would be the names, the usual suspects, I think, that the NDP would be turning to.
Sorry to interrupt, Greg. I'm hearing that Meili is coming up onto the stage, so let's go to him right now for the Delta. He should just be coming up in a second. So I'm actually, while we have the time, actually, I will ask, let's talk about how Ryan Meili has really changed and become the leader of the NDP and kind of the metamorphosis he's had.
Absolutely. And when you looked at him, some people, and I mean this in a kind way, kind of Mr. Rogers of Saskatchewan politics, and he's almost a little bit of an introvert in terms of personality. But what we saw is a big change both through this campaign, and all of Saskatchewan got to see him perform very, very well during the debate. Very composed, very empathetic, very thoughtful, great command of policy, and very relatable. And I think that was a big turning moment for Ryan Meili as leader of the NDP party.
Okay, we will have to leave it there. We're going to skip it on over to the Delta where Ryan Meili is about to speak.
Wish I could give you a hug, but I can't. So.
Well, good evening, Saskatchewan. This is the end of an exciting campaign, and it has been an exciting campaign. We've traveled to every corner of the province and had an incredible number of conversations. I've heard from you, your frustrations, your fears, your hopes for what we could build in Saskatchewan, and that's what this election is about. It's not about which party, which candidate, it's about you. It's about us and what we can achieve together as Saskatchewan people. And I want to thank you for the welcome that we've received everywhere we've gone. Of course, I also want to thank some other folks as well. Meili and Abraham and Gus and all of our family, the love and support. There's no way we do this without the people we care the most about. And to the people of Meewasin, it has been an honor to serve as your MLA, and I'd like to continue to do so. We'll find out more about that later tonight. And to the campaign team, what an incredible team. We put together one of the best campaigns I've ever seen, and I've been so proud to work alongside you and see the effort you put in, the volunteers, the staff, so many hours, so much passion. And, of course, the 61 candidates who put your names out there, knocked on countless doors, and you listened. You listened to the people of Saskatchewan. And this is exactly what this is about, to hear on the doorstep and to offer people that clear choice, that clear vision of an NDP government that would put people first. So it's a great campaign. I'm so proud of what we've done, but we know it wasn't enough this time. And I've just got off the phone with Scott Moe and congratulated him on remaining Premier. And I offered him, as we are both in service of the people of Saskatchewan, where we can agree, where we can work together, I'm always here. And where we disagree, he knows well that I will be straight with him and the people of Saskatchewan about those different visions. But my message tonight is for those who voted for change, because there are thousands upon thousands of people across Saskatchewan who voted for change tonight. And I want to tell you, this is not the end. This is the beginning. Do not give up, because we can, in Saskatchewan, we can do so much better than what we've seen. This is our home, and we can do the work to make it better. And we are, yes, we're going to be in opposition. And I believe it's going to be the strongest opposition this province has seen in years. And we will fight for you. We will fight for the people of Saskatchewan, for our kids, their parents, their teachers, for the folks on the front line working in healthcare, for the hard-working men and women of this province and the organizations that represent them, the Saskatchewan workers and companies who are ready to get on the job, First Nations people, Métis people, newcomers to this province. We fight, we stand up, we work alongside everyone, the young people trying to get started in life, the people out there working hard for the lowest minimum wage in the entire country. We will stand up with you, and we're asking you today to work with me, to work with us, to over these 4 years, tell your story, share your story, stand up for what Saskatchewan truly needs, so that together, 4 years from now, we can bring the people of Saskatchewan, the kind and generous people of our home, what they deserve, what we deserve, a government that puts people first. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
That was NDP Leader Ryan Meili that you just heard there, speaking from the Delta in Saskatoon. Greg, thoughts on this speech there? It wasn't as chipper as I was expecting.
No, not at all. This looks like a leader that's hugely disappointed, was expecting more out of tonight. The polls leading up were looking good in terms of making greater progress, and he wore his heart on his sleeve. He's clearly disappointed. He probably can take some solace if the evening continues the way it has for him, that he might not be the third NDP leader defeated in a general election. But clearly they have a lot of work ahead of them as NDP. Where do they go to actually make the gains that they want to make?
That's the question. He was saying, okay, not this time, but 4 years from now, let's build. If you are in charge of the NDP, how are you adjusting the platform? How are you adjusting discussions so that you're more successful?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think that's a really tough conversation for the NDP. Times change. We're seeing across the country more viable Green parties. The Green parties are going to pick up a few percentage points. They're able to run candidates right across every riding in Saskatchewan. That's part of the changing dynamic. So is there really a future for the old-style NDP in the province, or is that a party really of the 20th century, not the 21st century? Does the Saskatchewan Party need to think like the NDP Party need to think like the Saskatchewan Party and try and build a coalition of left and centre, just like the Saskatchewan Party built one that was right and centre? And that's going to be a big question. There'll be a lot of activists in the NDP who won't put wine with their water, as it were, and dilute it. And there'll be others that'll be more pragmatic and say, this is the province we're in, Canada we're in, times are changing, and maybe we need a different kind of party altogether.
All right, Greg Pelzer, thank you. Ryan, Allison, for now, we'll head back to you in studio.
Okay, thanks for that, Jackie, and thank you, Greg, as well. So I just want to go through a few things that jumped out to me in Ryan Meili's speech. First of all, calling it an exciting campaign, but also saying that this campaign is not about the politicians. It's not about the parties. It's about the frustrations, the fears, and the hope of the New Democrat supporters. It's about us, Meili says. He also says that this is not the end, this is the beginning. The
beginning, and I think that's kind of where you started there. That's what we've heard from Meili this entire campaign. It's about the people, putting people first has been his campaign slogan. What I found interesting, him saying he wants people to work with him over the next 4 years, implying that he is still going to continue to lead the NDP after tonight. The NDP looking like they're making a 2-seat gain at the moment right now. I want to point out, though, Saskatoon-Meewasin, Ryan Meili is up more than he was before, 255 votes up over Ryland Hunter right now. And that's going to be one of the close, oh, here we go, right now, 255 vote lead over Ryland Hunter. This is going to be one of the close races that we see tonight.
And it's funny, Allison, Meili actually said, as he thanked the people of Saskatoon-Meewasin, he said, we'll find out more about that later tonight. I guess the question is, will we find out more, or is this going to be one of the ridings where mail-in ballots is the deciding factor? Can you imagine being the party leader
and not knowing for days after election night?
Of the night, not even knowing if you have your own seat? Meili obviously appears disappointed, but also prepared to continue on for the next 4 years if he can.
Absolutely, and perhaps maybe some of that disappointment is coming from him right now, the uncertainty of not knowing if he's going to have his seat or not. And all of those close races are, you know, in the urban areas, in Saskatoon, in Regina, and that's where our David Akin is focusing his expertise on tonight. David, a lot of close races playing out in the cities.
Yeah, and I got to respond to Premier Wall there, and I hope he's watching. You know, a little anecdote here. During the federal election in 2019, we had the Premier on our set, and I mentioned to him at one point in the evening that the federal riding north here, Desnethia, Mississippi, the NDP was holding it, and Brad Wall turned to me and went, don't worry about it. The advance vote is going to bring it home for Gary Vidal, the Conservative, and sure enough, it did. So when he talks about the advance vote for the Sask Party being ready and accounted for and ready to go, I take that very seriously. I take what Premier Wall says very seriously. And sure enough, looks what's happened. Before we came and talked to the Premier, sure enough, Regina University, Alina Young was ahead, but now here's Tina Beaudry-Miller, and it's still very close, 40 seats, but we'll see how those go. Same thing, Coronation Park, that has flipped since we last checked, and now Mark Docherty, he's sort of opening things up. He's got a couple of hundred votes here for Mark Docherty in what is usually a pretty close race. So again, it's quite right. Things do matter. These advance votes, these mail-in ballots are going to change some things. And speaking of the former Premier, let's go down there to Swift Current. No, not Wood River, I'm sorry. Let's find, there it is, little Swift Current right there. And that is Premier Wall's successor, Everett Hindley. He's got 79% of the vote. That's pretty good. But how did Brad Wall do in 2016? Guy got 82% of the vote. That's pretty good, too. So that's what's going on down there in that part of the province. And again, sure, advance votes are going to be a big deal. NDP right now sitting at 15, and they'd like to have a little more. I've been getting some texts from some folks, New Democrats around the country, and they thought that that was sort of the low water mark, 15. And that's why I think you saw Ryan Meili and his wife, Meili, she looked so sad. And it's just a reminder that this is tough personally for families. You know, they're not on the ballot, but they kind of are with their spouse, their dad, their brother, their sister. You know, it can be a pretty rough game. And I'm certain Ryan Meili wanted to do a bit better. And it sure looked like his wife, Meili, she looked pretty torn up about this whole thing. But it's hard to do. And people who put their name on the ballot ought to be saluted. It takes a lot of courage, a lot of guts, and you got to have your family beside you. Guys?
And actually, we're seeing Scott Moe now walking up to the podium. He is about to address the Saskatoon Sask Party headquarters. Of course, we know the Sask Party will hold a majority government. He's about to take the podium now.
Well, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. And I got to tell you, I'm feeling pretty good tonight. Last week, we had a couple of big honkin' rallies for a strong Saskatchewan. And tonight, we're celebrating a big honkin' election win. Congratulations to everyone who had a hand in making that happen. There are so many people to thank here this evening. And there is a long, long list of thank yous that need to be handed out. But I want to start by thanking you, the people of Saskatchewan. For a fourth time, you have placed your trust with the Saskatchewan Party. You've given us a great responsibility, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We are humbled by the task that lies before us, and we are ready to go to work on your behalf. We are eager to build a strong economy, strong communities, strong families, and a strong Saskatchewan. For everyone in this great province. This has been an election unlike no other in our lifetime. It was challenging for Elections Saskatchewan and the thousands of election workers who administered the vote in this province. And I want to take a moment to thank them for running a safe and running a successful election. It was challenging for all of the candidates and the campaign volunteers who had to find new ways to reach their voters and to reach them safely. So I want to say thank you to every candidate from every party for putting your name forward, and thank you to all of the campaign volunteers, and I mean every volunteer for every party in the province. You are the people who make our democracy work, and you make it work well. You are the people that understand that elections are not decided on Twitter. You are the people who got out from behind your keyboard, and you went into the real world to knock on doors, to put up signs, to make calls, and to talk about what you believe in to Saskatchewan voters. That takes courage, and that takes commitment. And our province and our democracy are well served by a vigorous exchange of ideas, and by everyone who is willing to volunteer their time to advance those ideas to Saskatchewan voters. So thank you to all of the volunteers across this province for your work during this election. Congratulations to all of the successful candidates. Right now, we are looking at 40-some elected and re-elected Saskatchewan Party MLAs, and I'm so very glad to have so many of my colleagues join me back in the legislature. And I look forward to working with the new Saskatchewan Party MLAs that are elected for the first time here this evening. There are a few more candidates that still don't know whether they have won, and they may not know for a couple of days the results of their election until the mail-in ballots are counted. It's a nerve-wracking, I know it's nerve-wracking waiting for just a few hours for those results, and I can't imagine what it's going to be like waiting for a couple of days. But I guess that is the way it's going to be, and it's going to work in this year's very unusual circumstances. Friends, in Saskatchewan, we understand that voting is a great privilege. It's a fundamental freedom for each of us. Today, we honor those that have fought and sacrificed to defend that freedom that we enjoy, so that we might have this opportunity to debate openly in our communities and to decide freely who should govern this province. May we never lose sight of how fortunate we are to be from Saskatchewan and to live in Canada. Tonight, I would give you my word that we will be a government for all of the people. Whether you supported the Saskatchewan Party or whether your support lied with a different party, we will govern for all. And we will work to build a strong Saskatchewan for all of us. A few minutes ago, I had the opportunity to have a phone call with the leader of the NDP, Ryan Meili. I appreciated that call, and I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate Mr. Meili on running a very strong campaign. We obviously have our differences when it comes to policy, but I have never doubted Mr. Meili's love for this province. I have never disputed his commitment to making Saskatchewan a better place to live. I know his party will continue to serve Saskatchewan well as Her Majesty's loyal opposition. Ladies and gentlemen, I started today in Shelburne, my home community, and it was good to be at home, at least for this morning and last night. During the campaign, I did not spend as much time at home as I would otherwise. As a leader of a party, all too often you are required to be in other ridings, and at times you are an absentee candidate in your own riding. I am very fortunate to have a dedicated campaign team of volunteers that were working on my campaign at home again. It was headed by my campaign manager, Bev Rafi, And they did an absolutely incredible job in the constituency of Rosthern Shelburne, not just on the campaign, but they also as they always do, worked hard to ensure that I stayed grounded. And I'm so very grateful for the campaign team that we had and all of the support that we received from the communities in the Rosthern Shelburne constituency. It's truly the honor of my life to represent all of you, each of you, in the Saskatchewan legislature. So thank you to all of the folks back home for your support. To all of our Saskatchewan Party candidates and volunteers in every part of the province, you guys are absolute rock stars. I can't begin to thank you enough for you giving the time to support the cause. We know the work isn't finished. We know the work isn't glamorous. Going door to door, identifying supporters, working the phones, putting up the signs, and specifically to the volunteers, you also had to put up with your candidates. And for Don Morgan's team, I can tell you that would be half of the battle. And my team might say the same. For that matter, I would also like to say thanks to our volunteers across the province. Most crucially, I want to thank them for getting the vote out last week and getting the vote out today. What you did made all of the difference in the world. We prevailed because of the efforts that you made. So thank you. And there's another group that deserve our gratitude this evening. Our Sask Party team back in Regina at our central headquarters. First of all, our campaign co-chairs, Donna Harpower, one of the longest serving cabinet ministers in the nation of Canada, and Patrick Bundrock, who I'm sure is also one of the longest serving executive directors in the nation of Canada as well, but more important than that, he is the best. There are so many others that I need to thank here this evening, and more than I can actually list, but I do want to mention just a few of my senior staff. Shannon Andrews, Jim Billington, Graham Stewart, and Reg Downs. These are some of the brightest political minds in Canada at the moment, and I am so very fortunate to work alongside them each and every day. And finally, I want to thank the people closest to me, my family. Many years ago, I was a teenager and I happened into a neighbor's yard with a friend, and we were talking to a gentleman that lived there, and I couldn't help but notice that this gentleman, he had a beautiful daughter. Looking back, I think that was the moment that I fell in love with my wife, Krista. Krista and I were married quite young, and yes, we went through some challenging times. Still do from day to day. Raising kids, for example, while we finished our education at the University of Saskatchewan right here in the city of Saskatoon. We left the province to look for work like so many other Saskatchewan people did at that time. But wherever we were and whatever we were going through, we always had one another. And tonight I can say without hesitation, by far, the best thing that I have ever done in my life was marry my wife, Krista. Krista, thank you so very much for everything. Krista and I also have some children, two great children, Carter and Taryn. And of course, they're not kids anymore. They're young adults. They're carrying on with their lives. But they are the reason that I ran for this office in the first place. I want my children, and I want your children, to have the chance to build a career and to start a family and to build a good life right here in the province of Saskatchewan. That's what motivates the Saskatchewan Party more than anything else, and that's why I get out of bed each and every morning. Building a strong Saskatchewan for the generations that are coming. Lastly, I would take a moment to recognize my parents. My father, Don, is still attempting to retire. He wasn't having much success at that in the early years, but he is getting better at it here recently. My mother, June, is officially retired. She was an educator in our community of Shelburne for many years. Folks like so many in this province, I owe my mother and father so very much. There's no way in the world that I would be up here tonight without their love, their guidance, without their wisdom, without their support, and without the values that they have instilled in myself and my siblings. So thank you to my parents. Thank you, Mom and Dad. My friends, these last few months, they've been difficult ones for our province as we deal with this pandemic, and we still have some challenges that lie ahead of us. But we're coming through this better than most places in the nation. Thanks to what all of you are doing, each of you are doing, to control the spread of this virus. Today, most of our economy is open in this province. We have the lowest unemployment rate in the country, and the recovery is well underway in our province. So the ballot question this election was, who do you trust to lead Saskatchewan's economic recovery? Who do you trust to ensure that Saskatchewan continues to recover, continues to move forward, and continues to grow? That was the question, and this evening we got the answer, and we got the answer loud and clear, and it is a great honor, and it is a tremendous responsibility to know that Saskatchewan voters, they answered that question by saying, we trust the Saskatchewan Party. Tonight I would offer you this. We will work every day to be deserving of your trust, to lead a recovery that is worthy of your trust, and to build a great province that is also worthy of your trust. When the Saskatchewan Party was first elected in 2007, Premier Brad Wall, he set down a marker for us, all of us. He made it our clear duty, he made it clear that our duty was to work as hard as we possibly could each and every day to earn the trust of Saskatchewan people. It was our duty to leave things just a little bit better than we found them. And though we have been imperfect, like many governments before us, we have tried to live up to that goal during the course of the last 13 years, and it will remain our guiding principle over the course of the next 4. My friends, a government earns that trust by doing what we say we're going to do, by keeping our promises. It's what we did in our first 3 terms of office, and it is what we are going to do in this next term that you have provided us. So in the months and the years ahead, you will see us keeping our campaign commitments. Our focus will be on Saskatchewan's economic recovery while ensuring that Saskatchewan is an affordable place for everyone. We will cut your power bills by 10% this year. Everyone will benefit: renters, farmers, small businesses, homeowners. We are going to reduce the small business tax rate from 2% to 0% temporarily to support our economic recovery, so that small businesses in this province can invest, so they can expand, so they can hire, and so that they can contribute to our economic comeback. There will be a home renovation tax credit to make renovations more affordable for families and to stimulate activity in our construction sector. And we will make life more affordable for students by increasing the Saskatchewan Advantage Scholarship. We will invest in healthcare by expanding eligibility for autism funding, improving services for people with diabetes, and enhancing services and supports for those who are living with a disability. And we're going to make life more affordable for seniors by cutting the cost of ambulance calls and increasing the seniors' income plan. And we will do all of this while working towards balancing the budget by 2024. In the days ahead, we are going to strike another balance as we manage through this ongoing pandemic together. It's the balance of keeping Saskatchewan people safe, while at the same time keeping our economy strong and preserving the jobs in our province. Saskatchewan has already shown that we know how to find that right balance. We can protect lives and livelihoods, and we can do it at the same time. We've done it together thanks to all of you, and we will continue to do this together thanks to all of you. As I mentioned earlier, we will govern for everyone in this province, including those that did not vote for us. In this election, there was a number of voters, many of them in rural constituencies. They used their vote this election to express their frustration with the federal government. And to those voters, I want to say, I hear you. And I want to say this government hears you. We share your frustrations, and we share many of your objectives. We are not happy with the federal government either. And you have my word that we will continue to stand up for Saskatchewan as we have always done. There is no government in Canada that has advocated more strongly against a federally imposed carbon tax than the government of Saskatchewan. Together with Alberta, we have been steadfast in our opposition to Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines Bill, as well as Bill C-48, the No More Tankers Bill. And no government has been more active working on behalf of the sustainable industries that create wealth and jobs in this province and across the nation of Canada. The industries that contribute to the well-being of millions of people here and around the world. Agriculture, energy, mining, manufacturing. Saskatchewan is world leaders in each of these industries. They drive growth in this province, and they will continue to drive growth in this province in the years ahead. They enable us to invest in the quality of life that we seek. They enable us to invest in new schools, in new hospitals, and to invest in the vulnerable in our society. So tonight I offer you this. We will be unrelenting in defending our Saskatchewan industries and our Saskatchewan people. We will defend them here in Canada, and we will defend them around the world. We will always stand up for a strong and independent Saskatchewan. We will stand up for Saskatchewan because there is simply so much at stake. In this province, we are just beginning to explore the incredible potential that we possess. We're just getting started. And today, we have every reason to be so optimistic about our own future. No, not just because of our resources, the food, the fuel, the fertilizer that is in demand around the world that we possess. Not just because of our cutting-edge innovation in energy and agriculture and in food processing or in technology. We have every reason to be hopeful and optimistic because of you, the people of Saskatchewan. Determined and resilient, creative and compassionate, and always finding a way to get the job done. Ladies and gentlemen, we have been given a strong mandate this evening. You have reposed your trust and your confidence in us. We have a lot of work ahead of us. That begins tonight. And together, we can lead a strong recovery. We can build a strong economy, strong communities, strong families. And we can build a strong, growing, and vibrant Saskatchewan. Thank you so very much for the trust that you have placed in us. We will work each and every day to ensure that we are worthy of that trust and to be worthy of the honor of governing the great province of Saskatchewan. Thank you for joining us this evening. God bless us, Saskatchewan.
And that's Premier Scott Moe speaking at the Sask Party headquarters in Saskatoon tonight. Of course, after the Sask Party right now leading and elected in 46 of the ridings, a healthy majority there. And we heard he's very happy with the outcome tonight. Obviously, there was a lot of thanks. You saw the personal side of Scott Moe there, thanking his wife Krista, his family, the candidates, everyone who's helped out throughout the campaign. But then it turned to the policy side, which of course, no surprise there.
He kind of hit every major point you would expect from a leader speech, also thanking Ryan Meili for his service, saying he never doubted Meili's love for Saskatchewan or questioned his desire to make this a better province. One thing I noticed just near the tail end of Scott Moe's speech there, referring to the people of Saskatchewan as determined and resilient, strong and compassionate. That actually sort of harkens back to the speech that he made when the announcement was that Saskatchewan was starting to restart some of its economy in the spring. So even when he's not explicitly talking about COVID-19, it has completely been there in the background for virtually every step of this campaign. Of course, the ballot question was, Allison, according to the Premier.
Who do you trust to lead our province into an economic recovery? And you heard it there again in the speech. No surprise there. That, like you said, the ballot question. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they do lead us to that economic recovery, given that we're now seeing, record high COVID-19 cases across the province, 200 cases right now active in Saskatoon, 100 in Regina. That's the highest they've been. But still, he's saying we're not going to have to close the economy. There won't be a second lockdown. And then he's going into, moving energy and resource sectors forward, finding new ways for industry that way. And that's going to build our stronger economy. But you got to wonder, are we going to see some closures of the economy as cases worsen?
Well, I think the cynics would say that perhaps there was a cautious approach because of the fact there was an election ongoing. Perhaps there could have been an electoral outcome that would have come from shutting down parts of the economy again. But at the same time, as the Premier stated in his speech, elections are won and lost on the doorstep. It's all about the race. It's not won and lost on Twitter. It's not the keyboard warriors. So perhaps that was a reference to that. It also hasn't been the easiest campaign for Scott Moe when you look at the repeated instances where he had to talk about his driving record, and one of those instances unfortunately being fatal for the other person involved. So it could have been a reference to that. I'm not quite sure. It was interesting because I thought we might get a speech that ended on that heartfelt moment, you know, meeting the girl next door, falling in love, having a family together. I thought we might end there, but we didn't. As you mentioned, we got back into the platform promises and then going and standing up to the federal government as he has done,
and I think
for as long as he's been leader.
Absolutely. Like you said, he's done that as long as he's been leader. That's, you know, the classic Scott Moe. That's a Scott Moe leading the Sask Party that you would expect. You know, he does have the heartfelt moments, but at the end of the day, it's going to come back to policy.
And not an uncommon tactic. Let's be fair here. It's done in provinces across Canada. And I remember talking to a pollster once about why this always happens, and the answer was simple: because it works. It works. It's obviously secured 40. It's at least helped to secure 46 seats for the Sask Party, fourth consecutive government for this party. I can't say it enough. This is a political dynasty in Saskatchewan at this point.
And Scott Moe actually also thanking a lot of the candidates and congratulating the ones who have won. On the board, I was paying attention. We've seen, you know, Ken Cheveldayoff, Don Morgan, Bronwyn Aird, Dustin Duncan, Dave Merritt, Donna Harpower, all big names in the Sask Party have claimed their seats already being elected, and they're part of that leading and elected 46 Sask Party seats right there. Of course, the closer race is still in the urban ridings that we're watching. But, you know, we've heard from our leaders now tonight, but tonight is far from over. The race is tight, and the NDP are still hoping for a few more wins. We'll keep you updated on those races when we come back. For the Sask Party there. Of course, that high percentage is factoring in the strong Sask Party support in rural areas. When you look at urban centres in Regina and Saskatoon, it's actually much closer between the NDP and the Sask Party.
And really, that's the thing of this night, I think, Allison, is that there's still, at this point, races to be decided in the cities. The last time we checked in, I don't have the current figures, last time we checked in, it was close to 50-50 between the Sask Party and the NDP. So
absolutely, yeah.
So really, it's, while the seat count isn't looking entirely different, you're seeing some seats flip. I know we talked about Erica Lawson earlier versus Jennifer Bowes. That's a rematch.
We've been talking about Ryan Meili, checking right now in Saskatoon-Meewasin. Ryan Meili is up by only 210 votes against Ryland Hunter.
So is that going to be enough to declare it tonight? I just don't know.
That's the question of the night, I think, Ryan. And we've heard from both leaders now. We've heard from Ryan Meili. We just heard before the break from Scott Moe. And now we're going to check in with Jackie Wilson and Greg Peltzer in our Saskatoon studio to break down Scott Moe's speech.
All right. Thanks so much, Allison. Greg Peltzer joins me now. What were your thoughts on Scott Moe's speech just now?
I think we saw two different Scott Moes, and one that a lot of people would say when you know him on a personal level, a very caring, affable, affectionate man. You saw his expression of his gratitude to his wife, and that's a part of Scott Moe a lot of Saskatchewan doesn't regularly see, because they see the politician in the Premier Scott Moe. And the other Scott Moe, of course, when he was looking at policy, and the one thing that really stood out for me is where they see the threat down the road, which is the Buffalo Party. And he's prepared to reach out to try and capture that vote. And to capture that vote, he thinks he needs to go and double down on the battle with Ottawa. And that's clearly what he's signaling. So what we've seen over the last 2 years, or what we'll see over the next 4 years, is a doubling down on that battle with Ottawa to shore up the strength of the Saskatchewan Party and what he believes are the best interests of the province.
Right, and Allison just brought up the popular vote there before it came to us. What does it show for you and how the NDP are doing tonight? We have that 63 for the Sask Party, 28% for NDP.
Absolutely. I think this is a huge story, actually. if you look at every poll going in, especially the two last ones had them around 37, 38%. Almost all the polls recently were well over 30% for the NDP, and here they are underperforming. And if the advanced polls come in strong for the Saskatchewan Party, they're going to do even worse. What that tells me is the vote or the potential vote is there, their ground game isn't. The NDP basically failed tonight on get out the vote. They didn't have the organization to get out their voters that would probably support them if the polls are right, and there was a number of them showing that, and that's where they lost the night.
Where does the Indigenous voter play into all of this across the province? This
is a great question, and it's one of the things that hasn't been asked enough, and I'm glad you asked it, because when you look at our province, it's 15% Indigenous, and that population is growing. So you think of a riding like Riversdale, the Indigenous vote is going to be absolutely critical. If the NDP are able to squeak out Riversdale, one that's gone back and forth this evening, they'll have the Indigenous vote to thank for that win. So I think we're going to see more and more of those kind of ridings, not only in rural Saskatchewan, not only the north, but in the cities where the Indigenous vote is going to matter more and more in Saskatchewan, and that's something all political parties need to pay attention to.
All right, take note of that. Ryan Allison, back to you.
Thanks, Jackie and Greg. Interesting to note what Greg said there. He said the NDP failed at the get out to vote, getting people to the polls and showing that strong support at the ballots, and which maybe is reflective of them only picking up 2 seats when there was projections they could possibly get 20.
And if there was ever a time to get out the vote, if you're a party, it's in the middle of a pandemic.
Absolutely.
So that must make the sting that much worse for the NDP. Earlier in the show, we were talking about the potential benefit of having organized support in the form of teachers, in the form of labor unions, that type of thing. Of course, we haven't been able to dissect to such fine points, but it seems as though, as Greg mentioned, that somewhere the chain was broken and it just didn't happen.
Yep.
So we've talked a little bit about the Saskatchewan Party majority and what it means here in the province, but we heard in Scott Moe's speech also references to an ongoing fight, or at least an effort to stand up to the federal government. So with more on how the Saskatchewan majority plays nationally, let's go to Mark Carcassol and Mercedes Stevenson. Mark?
Ryan, with Scott Moe securing the big honkin' win, as he referred to in his speech, no surprise, no change to report tonight in terms of who's in power in Saskatchewan. But provincial elections are important to more than just the provincial electorate. They also have an effect on federal politics at play in Ottawa. We heard Scott Moe mention his relationship with the federal government, and keeping an eye on that is Global's Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stevenson. Now, Mercedes, first off tonight, I want to mention, interesting, that this just seems to continue a trend that we've seen in other recent provincial elections during this pandemic time of incumbents winning majority governments. Is there a lesson here for the federal government?
Yeah, I mean, we've now seen an incumbent win in BC, a majority incumbent win, a majority as well in New Brunswick, and tonight again in Saskatchewan. And remember that 2 of those elections, the ones in BC and in New Brunswick, were not like this election in Saskatchewan, which was mandated by law. They were snap elections that were called by minority governments that managed to get a majority. So does that send the message to the federal government here in Ottawa that if they were to go to the polls, they might get rid of their minority and come in with a majority? It's a great question, and it's one that I've been talking a lot about with senior Liberal sources here in Ottawa. They seem to think they're polling pretty well, and you've seen that reflected in their behavior. There have been 3 confidence votes in about a month. That is very, very close together, and 2 of them really weren't necessary. They were votes the government chose to invoke, including one where they actually took a Conservative Opposition Day motion about a committee and turned it into a confidence vote. That's never happened in parliamentary history. And it was really them playing a little bit of, I double dog dare you to go to an election because we think we can get a majority right now. Now, all of that said, Mark, tonight there are 2 federal by-elections going on as well, both of them in the GTA. The Liberals, it looks like winning both, but the one in Toronto Centre was a lot closer than people were expecting, even though the Liberals have won that one. The other one is still too close to call, and it has been going back and forth forth seesawing between the Liberals and the Conservatives. And Maxime Bernier seems to be sort of the wild card there. He decided to go run. That could cost the Conservatives that election, but I can tell you going into this, people thought these were supposed to be 2 easy Liberal ridings. So while looking at the provinces might suggest that they would get a majority if they were to go to the polls, and that's entirely possible, a reminder with those by-elections tonight that there's always a little bit of caution and unpredictability there.
Yeah, it sounds like they'll definitely be keeping a close eye on this one for sure. Mercedes Stephenson, thank you very much for your time tonight. Ryan and Allison, I'll throw it back to you guys on the desk.
Mark, and thank you for that, Mercedes, as well. Again, I just want to refer our viewers who are likely voters.
They're voting, yeah.
To the vote count at the bottom of the screen. You can see the Sask Party is leading and elected in 46 of those seats, the NDP 15. Let's look at the popular vote in Regina now.
If you take a look at it in Regina, Sask Party 48%, NDP 44%. At one point during the night, I believe they were tied with 44% each. So you can see that's been neck and neck there, and that's really where those close races are.
And in Saskatoon, the Sask Party had a more substantial lead than they did in Regina, but you can just see it solidifying around 12% there in terms of the popular vote. So we are seeing the Sask Party make inroads in the urban areas, and that's 71%. I think that just speaks to the sheer dominance in the rural areas.
Absolutely, and no surprise there at all. The NDP only with 20% of the popular vote. To grow the party, they're going to need to grow that popular vote.
But we've got some close urban races. Let's start in Saskatoon, Riversdale. This was Danielle Chartier's seat. 12-vote lead for Ashley Hicks over Marv Friesen. That's insanely close in Riversdale.
Regina University, a little less close, but still very close. 167 lead, Tina Baudry-Meller over new mother, Alina Young. Of course, this race last time around was decided between with 400 votes between the two. So 167, even less than that.
And Saskatoon Eastview, this one's fascinating. Daryl Cooper was ousted for some Facebook posts. Chris Garrett dropped in. Matt Love, though, a teacher in Saskatoon, could provide one of the positive stories for the New Democrat supporters.
Regina Pasqua, actually, Bajan Brar leading a 30-vote lead, so not really leading by a lot, but leading the incumbent Mohammed Fayez there. This was one of the closest races in 2016, decided by less than 300 votes. So
and
again,
also had the most mail-in ballots, Allison.
Yeah.
Going to Saskatoon-Mewassa now, again, Ryan Meili, around 210 votes, so that's dropped slightly from just a little bit earlier in our special here, but it really could go either way. Again, will Ryan Meili know that he's won tonight?
Crazy to think that we might not know the leader of the NDP if he's won his seat on election night or not.
It's this, if you needed an election special to summarize just how strange 2020 has been.
It's this one.
It's this one.
Absolutely. And of course, those close ridings really are dependent on, one, mail-in ballots like we've been talking, but also advanced polls which have been counted later this evening. So Caitlin Wilson is live at the NDP headquarters in Regina, where the NDP is hoping that the advanced polls put them over the top in these close ridings.
Yes, and I am here with Carla Beck, who has been re-elected to Regina Lakeview. Congratulations and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Katie.
And how are you feeling being elected for a second time now?
We're very happy with the campaign that we ran provincially and in Regina Lakeview. I couldn't be happier, for our team and our volunteers. They worked so hard through very interesting conditions for this win. And incredibly thankful and grateful to my neighbours for placing their trust in me again as their member of the Legislative Assembly. It's a bit different this time around, of course, not only because I was an incumbent, but also because campaigning in a pandemic is much different than campaigning in normal times. So very grateful and excited about the win.
And I do want to ask you about the advanced polls, with the NDP looking like they're picking up a couple of seats at this point. I am told that a lot of work was put into these advanced polls, and we could still see some of these ridings flip. Can you talk to me about that and the work that went into
into these polls? Yeah, very much so. Even in 2016, there were many constituencies in this province that were won by less than 1,000 votes. I think that those people who were looking for change, we were certainly hearing that on the doorstep. I think those might be the voters who are most motivated to get to the polls early and to get their mail-in ballots. So I think that we could see many of those polls that maybe aren't leaning our way right now flip by the time all of the votes are counted.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and again, congratulations. And thank you. For now, I will send it back to you. Allison, Ryan?
Thanks, Caitlin. Certainly interesting to note that Greg Peltzer actually brought up Carla Beck's name when talking about possible future party leaders for the NDP. Right now, we do know Ryan Meili possibly in jeopardy. Will he win his seat? Will we know tonight? I think he only has about a 200-vote lead, so very interesting.
Ryan Meili did say that he wants voters to basically prepare and work with him for the next 4 years. That's pretty tough if he can't win his seat in Meewasin. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but you do wonder if perhaps we just heard from a future, if not the leader of the New Democrats, but someone who plays a significant role in the direction they take in the future, Allison.
Absolutely, and looking at the bottom of the screen, you can see the NDP now down to 13 leading in elected seats. They were at one point at 2, which was a gain. But to discuss tonight's results, Saskatchewan's longest-serving female MLA and former NDP cabinet minister, Pat Atkinson, is with us. Miss Atkinson, thank you so much for taking the time. Tonight, right now, the NDP sitting at 13 seats. Ryan Meili's seat actually in jeopardy, a very small lead he has over the Sask Party. What are your thoughts on tonight so far?
Well, my thoughts are what are things going to look like on Wednesday, Thursday after all those mail-in ballots are counted. I know in our own constituency of Saskatoon-Nutana, I'm told that there are about 2,000 mail-in ballots. I am one of them. So my vote won't be counted tonight. And there are literally tens of thousands of people, particularly in Saskatoon and Regina, that went to a mail-in ballot because of the pandemic. Most of my friends did not venture out to go to the advance poll or out on election day. So I think that this election, when it comes to Saskatoon, Regina, perhaps Moose Jaw, is not over yet, and we'll know more when those mail-in ballots are counted.
Of course, the NDP hoping to make some gains tonight. We've been talking to analysts all night saying that for the NDP to make true gains, they would need to start getting out the vote in rural Saskatchewan. Where do you think the party needs to go to pick up that rural support?
Well, you know, I think one of the things that the Sask Party has been very successful at is painting a picture about the NDP and our years in government in the 1990s. And they've had an impact on rural Saskatchewan. But I would like to remind listeners tonight that the Sask Party now has practically a $23 billion debt in the province. And by the time the next election comes around, we're looking at $33.6 billion debt. Now, they'll argue that this is a small percent of GDP, but our GDP could be on the decline because the resource sector is in the tank at the moment, and the economy has taken a huge hit because of COVID. So I think the next 4 years are going to be difficult in the province of Saskatchewan, and there will be some tough decisions that the Sask Party will no doubt make, and it will have a tremendous impact on people not only living in rural Saskatchewan, but people living in our major centres as well. They'll have no choice. We have a major financial problem in the province, and it'll be interesting to see how they address it, because they'll have to address it.
Thanks, Ms. Atkinson. Now that's Pat Atkinson, a longtime NDP MLA, speaking with us from Saskatoon tonight. And interesting to note, she's holding out hope for the mail-in ballots to play a big part in a lot of these races right now.
Yeah, it's. I guess it kind of begs the question, which party prefers to cast mail-in ballots? I don't know the answer to that. I do find her comments interesting in terms of if there's an economic downturn in the next 4 years. Of course, we've seen a few years of challenges in the resource sector.
Yeah.
If you look at what happened in Alberta when oil absolutely crashed, where did they turn? They elected an NDP government. I'm no expert in Alberta politics, but I think it was the first time in 40 years it broke their political dynasty, right? So will voters, of course we're talking about hypotheticals, but will voters be more interested in a new Democratic Party, one that always positions itself as creating a bit of a social safety net? Are they going to be interested in that? Is that the situation we're going to be in 4 years? Of course, if you ask Scott Moe, we heard in his speech how Saskatchewan has built itself into a very strong province, and he used examples of the jobless rate, things like that. So it's almost a tale of two different Saskatchewans for the next election. But we're not there yet. We're still got plenty of interesting races, Allison.
And one of the big stories tonight is the Buffalo Party taking a larger than expected portion of the vote in southern Saskatchewan. We're going to dive into those numbers after a short break. Welcome back to Decision Saskatchewan. Now, it's been a night of wins and losses. Obviously, Sask Party majority of 48 seats right now. They're leading and elected. But a night of, you could maybe say, a win for the Buffalo Party.
Yeah, interesting stuff there for sure. We've got a couple ridings where the Buffalo Party is in second place. Although I'm a little perplexed by this because the party leader in Warman-Martensville, Wade Sira, did not perform that well. So on the one hand, the man who you would expect to be the figurehead of the party didn't do great. But if you look at some of these more southern regions, where they are oil-producing regions, they're traditionally very Sask Party-friendly regions, the Buffalo Party's fared quite well. So let's bring in David Aiken now, who can handle the analysis far better than I and sort of walk us through the board and what he's seeing in terms of the Buffalo Party.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'm an election addict, and they're always interesting. But believe it or not, the results tonight, there's a whole lot of really interesting storylines, even though the big picture is kind of unexpected. Okay, Sask Party and Moe won the majority, et cetera. And one of these is the Buffalo Party's performance tonight. Just 17 candidates, and yet provincially, they've got 3% of the vote. Now, clearly the comments that are going to get national attention tomorrow as people wake up in the rest of the country and go, what happened in Saskatchewan? Premier Moe's comments about, and I'll paraphrase, I don't think it's too far off, I've heard you Buffalo Party types. This government hears you. We're not happy with the federal government either. So Scott Moe is clearly interpreting the levels of support for the Buffalo Party as an anti-Trudeau vote. Maybe. Scott and Moe definitely know Saskatchewan better than I do. But also in Alberta, we have a sort of a Western separatist vote. We have the Maverick Party led by a former Conservative, Jay Hill. Those Western separatist votes, they take away votes from Scott Moe. And Conservative parties. They're a threat to the Saskatchewan Party. They're a threat to Jason Kenney's UCP in Alberta, just over the border. Let's take a look at, let's go right down to right on the border there. So Doug Steele, this is right now, he's got 65% of the vote, and check, he's elected. But look at how the Buffalo Party did. 1 in 5 voters went for Crystal Turringer. How did that happen in 2016? 2016, Doug Steele gets 80% of the vote. This is the Sask Party in 2016 gets 80% of the vote. I'm going to come back again. Sask Party now, we want to see 2020. Thank you very much. 2020, Doug Steele's now down to 65%. So that's all coming out of Sask Party's support. It's going over to the Buffalo Party. They're a threat. Where else are we looking at? Here's Wood River. Not much in Wood River for the Buffalo Party. What else did I want to show you? Oh yeah, let's go right down here to Estevan. Holy cow, look at that. Buffalo Party, 27% of the vote out of nowhere. Laurie Carr, the incumbent Sask Party, getting 61%. You're only getting 61% in rural Saskatchewan, if you're the Saskatchewan Party, something's going on here. There's a couple of ridings like that where the Buffalo Party is getting 10%, 25%, stuff like that. That's a big problem. Now, on the flip side, I just want to pick up on something Pat Atkinson talked about these mail-in ballots. And Ryan, I think you mentioned, where are they going to fall? Are they going to fall NDP? Are they going to fall Sask Party? Here's my read of it. Conservative parties around the country excellent on advance vote. Brad Wall spoke about that earlier. But mail-in ballots, what do we know about them? We're still learning a lot about them, but we certainly know that in the United States, mail-in ballots already, Democrats. Those on the left side of the spectrum trust mail-in ballots, they believe they're secure, and they've taken advantage of them. I would assume a voter in Canada is roughly the same. A conservative voter doesn't like mail-in ballots on security reasons. In fact, here in Ottawa at some House of Commons committees, we've seen conservative MPs raise questions about the security of mail-in ballots. And you know who one of those MPs was? A guy named Corey Toker, now the MP for Saskatoon University, of course, former MLA. Conservative voters are suspicious about mail-in ballots. So my read early on, and this is my hot take, put me down, check me on Wednesday when the count comes in, the mail-in ballots are going to favor a Democrat, New Democrat, progressive voter. I don't think conservative voters like these mail-in ballots. One more data point on that, the mail-in ballots are coming from ridings, urban ridings, where New Democrats hope to do well. There's not many mail-in ballots from way down here in southwest Saskatchewan, Weyburn, Big Buddy, etc. So there's my hot take. See how we do on Wednesday. Like I said, elections are interesting. There's always some fascinating storylines, and Saskatchewan has got a couple of them tonight.
Well, thank you for that, David. Of course, your hot takes and even the cooler ones are always welcome here in Saskatchewan. That's actually our last hit with you, David, for the evening. So thanks a lot for your analysis throughout the course of our show.
And
happy to be here, guys.
Interesting what David said about the Buffalo Party in Estevan. 1 in 4 people voting for the Buffalo Party, which is Laurie Carr's riding. I know we had seen Facebook posts in the Estevan area, some saying that Scott Moe isn't doing enough for the oil workers. So I think that shows right there that 1 in 4 people think that way.
And to get that result over not just a no-name candidate, Laurie Carr, very well known.
Exactly, yeah, Minister of Government Relations. And we're going to take a look now at the gains and losses tonight playing out. Sask Party elected in 48, which is up from the 46 seats they had at dissolution. Right now, NDP is sitting even with the 13 they had at dissolution. Hard to know if sitting even, no gains or losses, if they're going to see that as a win or lose tonight.
Yeah, and really we're seeing those two seats go back and forth. Mathematically, it's essentially the 2 vacant seats that were not filled through by-elections. So that's an interesting note there. Let's just take a look at the popular vote across Saskatchewan. Again, decisively Sask Party, Regina Walsh Acres.
So this was a vacant riding going into it. Warren Steinley, 107 vote lead for Derek Myers right now. Look at that vote splitting. I think this was talked about beforehand. Sandra Morin, the former NDP MLA cabinet minister, she didn't get her NDP nomination signed by leader Ryan Meili. Reasons still unknown. So NDP popped Kelly Hardy in there, and there was that fear of vote splitting, and it looks like that's what's going to lead the Sask Party to that victory.
I would say that's basically textbook vote splitting. Yeah. Now to Saskatoon Eastview again. Chris Garrett was dropped into this riding, and to replace Daryl Cooper, who was ousted from the party. To see Matt Love move ahead of Chris Garrett raises some interesting questions. She was a supporter of the federal Liberals in 2015. Yep. So at one time, the Sask Party was widely seen as a big tent party. Chris Garrett lost the nomination to Ryland Hunter in Saskatoon and Meewasin. Chris Garrett is a strong candidate, but she did not win that nomination. But then she was dropped into Eastview, one would think, because she probably had a decent political mechanism already in place. So it was easy to drop her in there. But now she's trailing the NDP. So I don't know what to make of that. Does that mean that the Sask Party, perhaps some voters just stayed home?
It could be, and close races like we talked about too in Regina, the Walsh Acres. Close races still, no one elected yet, and that's because of, we know advanced polling, we know mail-in ballots. Could be too tight to call tonight. And we're going to go to Colton Prale now at the Sask Party headquarters in Regina to talk about these tight races. Colton?
Yeah, Allison, at the start of the night, we told you there were 4 ridings we were keeping an eye on here in the Queen City. Those were Regina University, Regina Coronation Park, Regina Pasqua, and Regina Wall Shakers. We said they were going to be unpredictable. We weren't sure how they were going to turn. Now we're closing in on the end of the night, and we still don't know. In those 4 ridings, there are over 6,000 mail-in ballots that were sent out. Currently, those ridings separated all by fewer than 200 votes. This is going to be something that we're going to be keeping an eye on likely until Wednesday when we finally see what actually happens there. And as David Akin mentioned, we do know the NDP vote could play a factor in that, particularly when it comes to mail-in ballots. The big question is, of course, Tina Beaudry-Miller in Regina University. Will the Sask Party be able to keep a hold of that former cabinet minister? She's a very important MLA for them, especially when you look at the tech sector. That's something that was in their platform for this election. We did hear Scott Moe talk a little bit about that in industry in his speech. Well, Tina Beaudry-Miller helps that a ton. We know in 2018, that sector accounted for $5 billion, nearly 6% of the GDP. I spoke to a few industry experts there. They all said they are desperate to see her back in her seat. Allison?
And thanks for tracking those races for us tonight. That's the last time we're going to be checking in with you, as we eventually will come to a close here, getting closer to that 11 o'clock mark. But interesting to note, you know, it's election day, election night, but the results are going to keep coming in for days after.
Yeah, well, it's a fascinating thought to put yourself in the shoes of a candidate not knowing whether they've won or lost for several days.
Yep.
Maybe the optimist could say that, hey, several days of excitement, you know, waiting
several
on
days of
pins and
stress.
Well, you talk about Alina Young and several days of excitement.
Yeah, absolutely. New mother,
Yeah.
born, her baby daughter born yesterday, Hera Louise Astarte. She was actually due 10 days from tonight. So I guess it was 11 days early, but talk about delivering the day before an election, now watching the results play out live, and then not knowing if you've won your riding or not, and for another few days possibly. So,
yeah, no doubt. Well, after the break, we'll have another look at those close races in Saskatchewan and those that might be too close to call tonight. Stay with us.
Welcome back to Decision Saskatchewan. Thanks for staying with us. It's been a wild ride, I would say, tonight. A decisive Sask Party majority, and now all of these very close races up in the air. NDP still trying to gain some seats right now. They're sitting at 13, which is where they were at dissolution. But there's so many things at play as to why these races are so close, and we might not know by the end of the night.
That number, I don't think, really tells the story in terms of just the excitement.
No, it doesn't.
We called a Sask Party majority relatively early on in the night, but to have these close urban races and a lot of flip-flopping back and forth, including the leader of the NDP being involved in that conversation, it's interesting stuff. So let's start out in Saskatoon, Riversdale. This was an NDP seat, but it was vacant at the time. Actually, it wasn't vacant, but I should say it was Danielle Chartier's seat. High-profile health critic for the party. 27 vote lead for Ashley Hicks over Mar Friesen. I don't know if we're going to get that one tonight. Let's talk about Eastview. Chris Garrett for the Sask Party trails by about 186 votes to teacher Matt Love. That would be his first term in office, so a bit of excitement for the NDP there. Saskatoon University, a rematch. This is one of the flip-flops. This was held by Eric Lawson, former city councillor in Saskatoon, won his first term in 2016. Jennifer Bowes is fighting back now, and she's in the lead there. And there you go, Saskatoon-Meewasin.
This is the one we've been watching all night.
Ryan Meili with a 210 vote lead. We can't say it enough. If he does lose this seat, then that's the third straight for the New Democrats.
And here is some news. Gary Gruel, Sask Party, defeating incumbent Jens Petersen. Now, this was a rematch from the 2018 by-election. Jens Petersen only beat Gary Gruel by a little over 700 votes the last time around. And of course, voter turnout is usually a lot lower in by-elections as well. So maybe that played a part, but Gary Gruel taking this seat back from the NDP. Of course, Jens Petersen took it away from the Sask Party in that by-election. So this has been a flip-flop in the last 4 years.
You wonder if perhaps that's one of the examples of the failure to get out the vote, and maybe the Sask Party was just a little more organized this time around. And the NDP, would have been working hard to take that in a by-election to send a shot across the bow towards the Sask Party. We saw the NDP pick up 3 seats in by-elections between 2016
absolutely.
and just not too long ago.
And Regina Northeast traditionally is an NDP riding, so it's very interesting to see the Sask Party take that one. And with more on the NDP close races that they're hoping to pick up, we have Anna McMillan standing by at the headquarters in Saskatoon. Anna?
Hey folks, I want to talk about the big one. And Ryan, you were talking before the break saying, hey, maybe we could have more excitement or stress for the candidates as they wait for those other ridings to be called. And I think for the NDP, not knowing whether Ryan Meili has won his seat by the end of the night can only be stressful for them. This is a riding with a really interesting history. Meili won it in a by-election in 2017, claiming it from a formerly Sask Party riding, and it's going to be interesting to see how this one shakes out. Of course, the Sask Party's candidate, Rylan Hunter, is a formidable opponent, but Meili won the vote by about 54% in 2017, taking that one pretty handily. So if he doesn't win this one tonight, of course, the big question is going to be, what's next? We really don't know. Does that mean that's his end with the party, or does that mean maybe the NDP will hold a by-election with one of the candidates who won tonight, so Meili can step in that way? Of course, it all remains to be seen. We really can't make any predictions at this point. Keep in mind, Ryan Meili is still in the lead with 210 votes. I'll send it back to you guys.
Thanks, Anna, and thank you for keeping us up to date from Sask Party headquarters in Saskatoon all night. We really appreciate it. And as you just heard, 210 votes is Ryan Meili's lead right now. We're approaching the end of the night, and the leader of the opposition doesn't know if he has a seat yet or not.
He's planning on leading the party. We heard that he was asking voters to work with him
for
and
the next
the party
4
for
years,
the next 4 years to build towards something. But first thing you got to do is win that seat. It is possible, I suppose, in theory, that he could lose that seat and then be reelected in a by-election, but I doubt there's much appetite for that within the NDP.
Right.
I'm not really sure what would happen, but we should make it clear to our viewers as well that consistently Ryan Meili has held the slim lead there, somewhere between 150 to 210 votes.
He likes a close race.
And as we heard from David Aiken, it's possible that the NDP had a better showing when it came to those mail-in ballots, those 61,000 mail-in ballots.
Yeah, which could play a huge part come Wednesday when they're starting to be counted.
Yeah, and we heard a little bit earlier in the night about the impact of the Indigenous vote and how that could turn Riversdale into a new Democrat riding. We've seen that's also one of the really close ridings as the night nears its end. 16% of the population in Saskatchewan identified as Indigenous in 2016. So it is a significant population in our province. And to talk a little bit more about the Indigenous vote is Jackie Wilson and Greg Peltzer in our Saskatoon studio.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan. Let's continue our conversation about the Indigenous vote. Many people might not realize that 16%, like Ryan said, of our population are Indigenous people. How do they factor into the vote tonight?
Yeah, that's a great segue in, because you think about 1 in 6 people in Saskatchewan is Indigenous, and that population is growing. So you look at the 2 most northern ridings where it's over 80%, about 85% of the population is Indigenous. The NDP won handily. You look at even though it looks like the Sask Party is going to win both Prince Albert ridings, Prince Albert has about 30% of the population is Indigenous, and that's why you see a relatively strong showing outside the big cities in a city like Prince Albert by the NDP, and a large part of that is because of the Indigenous vote. You look at the Battlefords. There's another riding in which there is a respectable showing for something that should have been an absolute slam dunk for the Sask Party. And again, I think that's showing the strength of the Indigenous vote. We're seeing that out there. We're also seeing it in the cities, and of course Riversdale is one that if the NDP pull it off, I would argue that they have a big thank you to make to the Indigenous voters in the neighborhoods that make up Riversdale. And that's a trend that's going to continue. The Aboriginal population, First Nation Métis peoples of this province, those populations are growing in regional centres like Prince Albert, North Battleford, of course, and then cities like Saskatoon and Regina. And we're going to start to see more and more where there's close votes, as we're seeing tonight, where 200 votes makes the difference whether a party wins or loses a seat. And it's going to be the Indigenous voter that's going to determine a lot of times, and perhaps in the future, who forms government in Saskatchewan.
Let's talk about then for each party, Sask Party, NDP. What do you kind of put in your platform that'll make Indigenous voters want to vote for you? We'll have to do it quickly with about 30 seconds.
You bet. You got to take seriously the whole thing about reconciliation, the fact that we're all treaty peoples, and then map out with some thought economic policy, social policy, and the cultural inclusion of Indigenous peoples as true founding peoples of this province. There's Scott Moe referred to it in terms of the forest managed agreements, for example, which make a huge difference in terms of Indigenous participation in the forestry sector. It was mentioned a lot in the NDP platform. It probably clearly fuller in the NDP platform, for everything from education, healthcare, as well as employment opportunities. The New West Partnership, this is one huge opportunity that neither party really spoke to, because the exemption to direct award to Indigenous businesses, the largest single economic advantage our province has.
Very interesting. Greg, thank you so much. Brian Nelson, back to you.
All right, thanks for that, Jackie, and thank you, Greg. Yeah, interesting point there in terms of a huge economic advantage to have such a high Indigenous population in our province. It also makes you wonder about how the parties will cater to that group. I mean, first and foremost, I think groups should be catered to because it's the right thing to do. But when there's also an electoral benefit too, you wonder if that maybe greases the wheel that much more.
Yeah, and we're going to actually take a look now at party totals. The Saskatchewan Party, 48 seats right now, leading and elected. That means they currently are holding the 2 vacant seats that were left vacant at dissolution. That's Regina Walsh Acres and Saskatoon Eastview. NDP sitting at 13. Of course, that's where they were at dissolution, so no gain, no loss there. But some were expecting possibly the NDP to pick up closer to 20 seats tonight. So that's a bit disappointing for the party.
Yeah, that was sort of the ceiling. The ceiling I've heard could have been as high as 22 for the New Democrats. For 13, it's you know, if you were playing blackjack, you'd call it a push, right? Yeah. You're just breaking even. I guess if the NDP wants to be a little bit more optimistic, you could say that it's still a 3-seat gain from 2016.
Right, when they only had 10. Yeah.
I think that's just kind of fudging the numbers when you look at the fact that it was 13 coming into tonight.
And of course, some of these seats aren't decided yet, and that is largely to do with mail-in ballots, which we've been talking about all night. And we're going to go now to Roberta Bell live for us. Roberta, how important is the mail-in ballot vote right now?
It's extremely important, Allison, as we have heard throughout the night. And among the many unique things about the election in this pandemic is just how many unknowns there are still when it comes to who's going to be filling these seats in the legislature behind me. We do know that there are still a number of close ridings that could be too close for Global News to call tonight. There are about half a dozen ridings right now where the leading candidate has about a 5% lead. There are about a dozen ridings where the leading candidates within 500 vote margin of the candidate just behind them. For comparison, we do know that in the last election there were only 8 of those ridings. So with 61,000 mail-in ballots and 35,000 out there, we do know that that is a major factor.
Thanks for that, Roberta. And of course, we know that there are going to be races that are too close to call tonight. Actually, though, we're calling one right now, which we thought was going to be close. Regina Walsh Acres, it looks like. Derek Myers' Sask Party has been elected. Now, this was a vacant seat after Warren Steinley, MLA, turned to federal politics. Derek Myers now winning. Look at that vote
That's what I'm
split.
losing my breath
That is
over here about.
48% Derek Myers. If you combine the NDP and independent Sandra Morin, you also get 48%. Of course, the story with this, Sandra Morin was the NDP nomination. She won the contested nomination. Ryan Meili refused to sign off on her nomination papers, so she went NDP, and then that vote split was always a possible concern. So we're going to wrap up a lot of those other races that are too close to call for tonight when we come back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back to Decision Saskatchewan. And Ryan, it's been quite the night for the Sask Party. A decisive majority declared fairly quickly. They have now 8 new MLAs, and we're going to bring up the boards for you to show you some of them here. Before break, we told you about Regina Walsh Acres electing Derek Myers with 48% of the vote. But if you look, the NDP and the Independents split that vote. They also 48% together. Regina Northeast, another new MLA for the Sask Party. Gary Gruel won with just 51% of the vote, a 615 vote lead over incumbent Jens Peterson. Moose Jaw North, Tim McLeod elected with 64% of the vote, beating out Kyle Lichtenwald. Of course, there was no incumbent in this riding, but before Tim McLeod, it was held by the Sask Party. Last Mountain Touchwood, again, no incumbent, but definitely a Sask Party stronghold. 63% of the vote Travis Kiesig took has been elected for the Sask Party.
And in the Battleford's Herb Cox's old riding, it's Jeremy Cockrell taking that one over Amber Stewart, who really seemed to have the right resume that you would ask for in terms of a person who would run for office. She is the representative for the area's sexual assault center. So that's really the type of person the NDP would want to field in the type of riding like the Battlefords, but it seems to be sticking with the Sask Party. So we showed you 5 examples there of new Sask Party MLAs, but there were a total
8
of
in total.
8.
Yeah. And of course, as the night comes to a close, we know most of the results. There are going to be some, it seems, that we're not going to know maybe by the end of the night, largely to do with mail-in ballots. And to talk more on that and the impact, we have Jackie Wilson and Greg Peltzer standing by in our Saskatoon studio.
Thanks, Allison. As you mentioned, the mail-in ballot is a big factor tonight. That's going to be counted on Wednesday. Greg Peltzer joins me now. Greg, what do you say? How does this play out for mail-in ballots?
That's the million-dollar question. So one school of thought, of course, is the concern over COVID. People like teachers, healthcare workers, and so on, who might tend to vote NDP, could represent a large proportion of those mail-in ballots. The other school of thought, which I think is probably the more likely, is that a lot of these ballots are actually Sask Party supporters. Sask Party is well organized in terms of early voting, mail-in voting, and the snowbirds and the retirees in the cities that are taking advantage of the mail-in voting. What we saw in British Columbia, any type of early voting favored the incumbent, which was the NDP, better organized. And I'm actually expecting come Wednesday that we're going to see a stronger count for the Sask Party than even tonight.
Do you think mail-in ballots are here to stay 4 years from now?
100%. I think COVID has changed so many things, from education to workplace to Zoom meetings, and I think also elections. And I think overall this is actually going to be a good thing, because it expands the opportunities for voters to vote and for parties to organize voters to get out the vote, whatever the political stripe. So I actually think this is going to be a trend that continues, and it's actually going to be very healthy for democracy.
Okay, there you go. Ryan, Allison, back to you.
Thanks, Jackie and Greg, and thank you so much for your insight you've given us throughout the night. We really appreciate it. And talking about trends maybe that we could see with mail-in ballots playing a bigger factor. So this next election we can expect to see too close to call for the night, down to the wire. We still have quite a few ridings that are going to be too close to call tonight, and let's take a look at them now.
And start out with Saskatoon Riversdale. Ashley Hicks seeing if she can hold on to that one for the NDP, separated by 27 votes. And Saskatoon Eastview, Matt Love over Chris Goretz, separated by just 86 votes. It's easy to imagine having 86 votes in a mail-in ballot. And Prince Albert Northcote, this is Nicole Rancourt, an incumbent there, trailing healthcare worker Alana Ross. That'd be huge for the Sask Party.
Regina University, this was expected to be a close one, and it did not disappoint. Tina Beaudry-Meller just leading by 167 votes.
And Saskatoon-Meewasin, Ryan Meili still holding on to that lead of around 200 votes over Ryland Hunter. I guess we got to see if, you know, that idea of the New Democrats voting by mail in greater proportions, if that actually materializes for him.
Crazy to think that we do not know that the leader of the NDP will have a seat right now by the end of the night. You know, election night's tonight, but results are going to drag out for quite a while.
You have to wonder how well Ryan Meili and his supporters will be sleeping over the next few days.
I would guess not very well. You saw his speech too earlier on tonight, a little deflated almost, and I'm sure that's got to be the nerves and the stress thinking about where he stands.
Yeah, well, he is also a more measured person, though, so you really wonder what's going through Ryan Meili's head along with everyone else in the New Democratic Party tonight.
Well, the political landscape of Saskatchewan hasn't changed much from what we saw just 1 month ago, but it's not over yet. As we just showed you, many of those ridings are still too close to call, and that's largely due to the mail-in ballots.
No doubt. We will keep you updated on our website when those results come in. We could be waiting until Wednesday for those mail-in ballots to be counted.
Thanks for watching, and as always, it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and get ready for the civic election.